Season 21, The Wolf and the Guardian, Part 2. Chapter 1. Steel, Silence, and the Things That Endure. The workshop hummed with quiet life. Doors whispered open and shut, bootsteps echoed over polished concrete, runes flickered softly along the walls, casting faint lines of silver and blue across reinforced glass and enchanted steel. The war had moved on, but its shadow still lingered. Gunnar moved down the corridor with slow, stubborn precision. Each step measured, not because of pain, but because he refused to show any. His shoulders squared, jaw tight, the faint hiss of servos in his cybernetic arm the only betrayal of his condition. He wasn't limping, he was moving forward. Beside him, Clara walked in silence, her posture disciplined and steady, like she'd taken up the weight of the world and made peace with it. She didn't hover, she didn't question, she just walked with him, like always. Eliana flanked the other side, her presence a quiet contrast, measured, calm, eyes alert. She didn't look at him, not directly, but her attention never strayed far from his breathing, his posture, his hesitation. There wasn't much to watch. He didn't give them much. "I'm fine," he muttered finally, as if the silence demanded it. "No one said you weren't," Eliana replied. Clara smirked. "Yet." Gunnar exhaled through his nose and kept walking. They passed the fabrication wing. Two techs saluted sharply as he passed, their expressions flickering between surprise and barely hidden respect. They hadn't expected to see him up yet, neither had most of the workshop, which was exactly why he was. The main tech bay came into view, its doors already sliding open as Eli looked up from a glowing console and narrowed her eyes. "You're late," she said. "I'm early." "You're stubborn." "You're not the first to say that." Eli didn't dignify it with a response. Instead, she turned back to her workstation, fingers dancing across the runic interface. "Sit. Braces calibrated. Let's see what kind of damage you ignored this time." Gunnar made his way to the diagnostic chair with only a slight pause. Less hesitation, more irritation at needing the pause at all. He sat, left arm extended, the cybernetics already syncing with Eli's waiting sensor array. The soft glow of activation lit the room with a pulse of white-blue light. Glyphs hovered in the air, cycling through limb integrity, magical channeling output, and neural tether lag. Behind the numbers, Eli watched him like a hawk. "Systems compensating for damage you haven't let Jewel treat yet," she said. "It's fine. You're pulsing at 9% above norm. That's not fine. It's pissed off." Gunnar didn't answer. Instead, his eyes drifted past her to the workbench at the edge of the bay and stopped. There, laid out in cold reverence, was Starbreaker, or what was left of her. The modified assault rifle sat in fractured pieces, barrel split, chamber exposed, casing warped. The ancient runes engraved into its frame were dim now, like they were waiting for breath that wouldn't come. Gunnar stood before Eli could stop him. He crossed to the table slowly, hand reaching out to touch the scorched metal. "She's quieter than I remember." Eli's voice followed behind him. "She's waiting." He brushed his fingers over the cracked casing. "She shouldn't have had to take that hit." Eli stepped beside him now, arms crossed, eyes on the weapon. Not him. "She took it because she was built for it, and now she'll be better." He glanced at her, brow raised. "You don't fix things, Eli. You rebuild them." She nodded once. "Exactly." Gunnar stared at the pieces. Not just a weapon. A symbol. A part of him forged in battle, broken not in failure, but in service. "I thought it would be harder to look at her like this." Eli's voice softened, just enough. "Because she didn't fail. She did what she was meant to do." Gunnar's throat worked as he nodded. He didn't say thank you. He didn't have to. Eli turned back to her workstation. "Sit your ass back down. We're not done." Clara's voice called from the door. "If he passes out, I'm leaving him on the floor." Gunnar smirked, and for a moment, just a flicker, he looked like himself again. "I've had worse." "Yeah," Eliana said, "and I've seen what that costs." Her words weren't a rebuke, they were a reminder. Gunnar met her eyes across the workshop, And whatever conversation came next, it had weight behind it, the kind that could shift realms. Gunnar returned to the diagnostic chair with a quiet grunt, the kind that acknowledged pain but refused to yield to it. The reinforced stool adjusted beneath his weight, and the bracer Eli had locked around his forearm hummed as it finalized its scan. She didn't speak for a while. Her fingers moved with surgical precision over the glowing interface. Sigils rotated and reformed, a silent ballet of code and magic as her eyes tracked lines of output only she could fully understand. Clara stood off to the side, arms folded, watching with a soldier's patience. Eliana lingered near the threshold, her arms at her sides but her gaze steady, reading Gunnar, not the screen. "You burned out 2 feedback channels," Eli said finally, her tone all business. "Overclocked your reflex calibration, rerouted too much force through the knuckle actuators." Gunnar exhaled through his nose. "Had to punch through a wall." Eli gave him a side-eye. "You punched through a reinforced, war-forged obsidian wall." He shrugged. "It worked?" "It fried 3 regulators." "I said it worked." Eli narrowed her eyes. "You know, if you break this thing, you can't just grow another one." "Sure I can." "You'll just build it." She didn't laugh. She reached into a drawer and pulled out a small crystalline wand, flicking it over a set of exposed ports near the base of his wrist. "You're lucky the runes didn't fracture. If they'd gone into feedback lock, you'd have lost control of your grip. Best case, you crush your own weapon. Worst case, you crush your own rib cage." Gunnar didn't flinch. "Still worth it." Eli sighed under her breath. "You're not invincible, Gunnar." He looked at her then, just briefly. "No," he said, "but I'm not done either." That landed like a stone between them. Eli didn't argue. Instead, she opened a toolkit and began adjusting one of the anchor nodes embedded in the cybernetic limb. The click of enchanted tools and the soft whir of recalibrating servos filled the air. "You melted the recoil dampener too," she muttered. "Probably during that last blast. Starbreaker took most of the energy, but your shoulder wasn't meant to compensate like that." He rolled the shoulder, wincing slightly as something inside clicked back into place. "I noticed." She paused, then leaned in, adjusting a tuning crystal embedded in the outer plating of his forearm. "You'll notice less once I finish this upgrade," she said. "I've got a new dampener system, custom built. Absorbs recoil, stores kinetic energy, and redirects it as punch force." Gunnar blinked. "You turned my arm into a battery?" Eli grinned. "I turned it into payback." A small click, then a pulse of blue light ran through his fingers as the diagnostic bracer finished its recalibration. "Try it now," Eli said, stepping back. Gunnar flexed the fingers, then curled them into a fist. The movement was smoother, quieter. No grind, no lag. His shoulder didn't pull as much when he shifted his weight. He nodded. "Feels good." "Better than good," Eli said. "You'll notice it when you hit something. Or someone." Clara finally stepped forward. "He'll test it on the first idiot who mouths off." Gunnar tilted his head. "Could be you." Clara smirked. "Try it. I'll dent your ribs again." Eli shut down the interface and pulled the bracer off his arm. "You're cleared for use, but not full field work yet. No sprinting, no diving off rooftops, no catching magical blades mid-air." Gunnar was already rolling his shoulder. "I'll walk briskly and only punch stationary targets." Eli gave him a sharp look. "I'm serious." "I know," he said. "That's why I'm ignoring it." She sighed again and handed him a small vial of restorative fluid. "Take it. It'll help flush the burnout residue from your system." He took it without argument this time, downing it in a single gulp. The taste was like warm metal and crushed herbs, but it settled into his chest like calm. Clara's voice broke the quiet. "Good?" Gunnar stood, testing the weight of his arm, fingers flexing. "Good." He looked back towards Starbreaker on the table. "Now let's get the rest of me back together." The garage bay doors were rolled wide, letting in the sharp light of a clear day. Fans spun slowly overhead, pushing warm air through the space scented with steel, grease, and faint ozone. The sound of work was constant but focused, clinks of tools, the murmur of runes charging on stabilizer plates, the hum of heavy machinery in motion. Suspended above the floor by a reinforced hoist, the second Wolfmobile chassis hovered in mid-air like a dormant beast waiting to wake. Thicker armor, broader frame, meaner profile. Below it, Darren crouched near the mounting plate, elbow deep in a wiring harness, half of his forearms smudged with oil and enchantment dust. On a metal lift platform above, Caleb stood next to the suspended engine, guiding the block down with deliberate movements, the lift chain creaking with tension. 2 centimeters left, Caleb called down. You're off alignment. I'm off alignment, Darren barked from below. You're the one with the bird's eye view, genius. Then listen to me and shift it. You shift it, pretty boy. I'm contorting like a goblin yoga master down here. The familiar growl of a voice cut through the air like worn steel. If this turns into a 2-man slap fight, I'm having Eli install seatbelts that punch you in the throat. Both men stopped. Gunnar stepped into the bay with Clara and Eliana behind him. He wasn't striding. His movements were deliberate, held in tight control. But he wasn't favouring his injuries either. He moved like a man reasserting ownership of his space. Caleb looked down, straightening instinctively. Didn't expect you on your feet this early. Surprise, Gunnar muttered. Darren peered out from under the chassis, squinting at him. And here I was, enjoying the peace and quiet. You just don't like supervision, Gunnar said, stepping closer. His gaze swept the machine, not a glance, but a thorough scan. Armour, welds, wiring clusters, wheel clearance. You beefed up the suspension, he noted. Darren pushed to his feet and leaned on the lift post, wiping his hands with a rag. Yeah. Last run cracked the trailing arms. This one's tougher. Handles terrain better. Less likely to flip when Caleb decides to drive it like a maniac. That was one time, Caleb muttered. And it was majestic, Darren shot back, but terrifying. Gunnar circled the chassis, eyes trailing over the wider turret mount, the reinforced side panels, and the recalibrated rune chamber set into the undercarriage. This isn't a rebuild, he said. It's a step forward. Yeah, Caleb replied. Learning from version 1. This one holds more weight, runs cooler, and has better mana filtration in the power loop. Clara gave a low, approving nod behind him. She'll take a beating. Darren grinned. That's the idea. Gunnar paused near the passenger side, letting his hand rest lightly on the armour plating. You named her yet? He asked, without looking up. Caleb raised an eyebrow. Didn't think we were doing that. Gunnar shrugged. Might be worth it. First one earned hers. Darren crossed his arms. You want to name this one too? Gunnar said nothing at first, then quietly, not yet. There was a beat of silence. Eliana watched from the edge of the bay, eyes unreadable. She could see it, the way he took in the bolts, the cables, the spacing. Not just assessing the vehicle, but the work, the readiness, the people. Clara stepped up beside him. It'll be ready. He nodded once. Good. He looked to both men, tone level. Keep the turret balance tight. The recoil kicked too hard last run. Already tuned, Darren replied. Eli's working on a new dampener mod. Gunnar didn't smile, but his voice softened just slightly. Good. Keep her angry. But stable. He lingered a moment longer, gaze falling to the tyres still unmounted, the cables waiting to be tightened, the tools laid out in exacting rows. Then he gave a nod. To the machine, to the men, to the moment. Carry on. Darren offered a mock salute. You got it, boss. Gunnar turned, Clara and Eliana falling in behind him once more as they stepped out into the hall, moving forward again just like before. This time, though, neither of them missed the subtle way his right hand flexed, the fingers of the repaired cybernetic arm tightening as if preparing to carry something heavier than steel. Chapter 2. Breakfast and Balance. The smell of breakfast lingered in the air, fresh bread, spiced eggs, real coffee that had somehow survived rations. The mess hall wasn't crowded yet, but voices echoed faintly from nearby tables. Engineers grabbing meals between shifts, patrol teams sliding into booths with weary shoulders and half-laced boots. At the far end of the line, Bianca moved with the same quiet intensity she brought to every drone she flew. Hair pulled back, sleeves rolled up, clipboard tucked under one arm as she flagged a volunteer about a delivery tray gone cold. "Reheat station's down again," she said, motioning with her chin. "Swap that tray out and tell Eli I need a new heating glyph before lunch rush." She turned and paused as Gunnar stepped into the mess with Clara and Eliana just behind him. Her face lit with something between surprise and relief. "Well," she said, "look who decided to stop playing corpse." Gunnar raised an eyebrow. "I didn't realize you missed me." "I didn't say I did," she replied, already moving to grab a mug from the nearest rack. "I said you were late. Again." He took the coffee she handed him without protest and followed her as she gestured to an open booth near the window. Clara and Eliana fell in behind without speaking, just settling in, muscle memory guiding them to seats they knew too well. Bianca slid into the booth across from Gunnar and leaned in, scanning his face like a medic who didn't carry the title. "You look better," she said. "Still pale, still stubborn, but better." "I'm upright," Gunnar replied, taking a sip of the coffee. "It's a start." "You hungry? I'm not dead, am I?" She gave a small smirk and flagged a passing runner. 3 plates, real eggs, the thick bread, and whatever vegetables haven't been turned into military-grade mush. Clara leaned back in her seat, watching the two with quiet amusement. Eliana said nothing, but her gaze stayed fixed on Gunnar, as if waiting to see if he'd wobble or crack. He didn't. Bianca set her clipboard on the table and folded her arms. "You doing full rounds today?" Gunnar nodded. "Already checked in with Eli. Arms solid. Saw Darren and Caleb in the bay. Wolfmobile 2's coming along." Bianca tilted her head. "And what about you?" He paused. "I'm walking. I'm talking. I've had worse." "You have," she agreed. "But I think this is the first time it's scared all of us." The silence that followed wasn't heavy, just real. She let it sit, then gently broke it. "Everyone's watching you, you know. Not just because you're the alpha, but because if you can stand, they'll stand too." He didn't meet her eyes right away, just took another sip. Then he said, "Then I'd better keep standing." A young runner brought their plates, still steaming, not half burned, and miraculously unspoiled. Bianca gave a small nod of thanks and dismissed him with a flick of her fingers. Clara stabbed a piece of egg with her fork. "You still using those mirror pans?" Bianca grinned. "Only the ones that reflect judgment." Eliana smirked faintly, finally picking up her fork. "I see why Darren stays out of here." "That's because Darren's afraid of 3 things," Bianca said, holding up a finger for each. "My coffee, my frying pan, and commitment." Gunnar actually gave a soft chuckle at that, and for a brief moment, the weight lifted, just enough for the smell of warm bread and the clatter of silverware to feel like a lifeline instead of a ritual. Bianca looked at him one last time as she stood to leave. "Eat, then go be stubborn somewhere else." He didn't argue. As she walked away, Gunnar tore a piece of bread in half, gaze following her for a heartbeat before drifting back to the plate in front of him. "I missed this," he said quietly. Clara looked up. "The food?" "No." He glanced at the 2 women across from him. The stillness before the storm. Neither of them corrected him, because they all knew the storm was coming. Chapter 3. The War Room. The room lived up to its name. Walls of rune-etched screens, crystal-fed maps, and communication nodes glowed in steady pulses. A large tactical table dominated the center, surrounded by chairs worn from years of elbows, plans, and pressure. This was the room where decisions changed the world, and where Gunnar had bled too many of them into the walls. He entered without announcement, behind him Clara, steady and unreadable. Eliana, quiet, watching. The others were already waiting. Desiree, arms crossed, posture military straight. Ashley, seated and calm, Beta nowhere in sight but felt in her absence. Darren lounging against the wall, shotgun slung but unloaded. Eli tapping a rune tablet with practice speed, half her mind elsewhere. Jewel perched on the far side of the room like a quiet sentinel, arms folded, expression sharp. They turned when he entered. Nobody said a word until Jewel spoke. "You're pushing it." "I'm walking," Gunnar replied. "You shouldn't be." "I'm not asking." Jewel made a faint noise like she might argue, but Clara raised a hand slightly. The medic backed off. For now, Gunnar stepped to the head of the table and looked at each of them, one by one. Then he spoke. "Status." Desiree stepped forward first. "All squads accounted for. Shade and Katrina are holding down Merkdust. Argos is with them. Patrols are running smooth. Civilians are settling, and the new drop point is active. So far, no sign of Syrian, her son, or the traitor. We're still blind on their movements." Gunnar nodded. "Supply?" Eli answered without looking up. "Ammunition is at 80% capacity. The enchanted rounds are stable, the Silver Line is running again. The Wolfmobile's second unit is nearing combat ready. We'll be field testing tomorrow." "Bianca?" "Feeding everyone and still managing drone ops," Clara said. "You trained her well." He didn't respond to the compliment, just shifted focus. "Medical?" Jewel stood straighter. "No fatalities in the last rotation. Minor burns, a few mana lacerations, and one idiot who tried to eat a pocket crystal." Darren raised a hand. "He thought it was candy." Jewel gave him a look that could skin concrete. Gunnar cleared his throat. "Ashley." She looked up. "You're heading to Merkdust," he said. "We need a steady presence there. Shade and Katrina are hunters. Sharp, but not the kind to manage people. You are. You've earned their trust. Keep things running. Keep the peace." Ashley nodded once. "Understood." Gunnar turned to Darren. "The 5077th? "Grumbling, but working," Darren replied. "Embassy foundations are in. Walls go vertical in 3 days. I've got 2 crews on armor rotations, 1 on drone shielding. Nobody's happy, but they're moving." "Good." Gunnar paused. "Keep them focused." Darren tilted his head. "Even the elves?" "Especially the elves." A few of them chuckled, tension breaking just a little. Then Gunnar turned to Clara. The room quieted. "I'm stepping back," he said. She didn't react, just waited. "You're in charge while I'm out. Full command. No questions. Desera is your second. Eli handles all workshop control. Jewel reports directly to you. Ashley holds Merkdust. Darren runs the 5077th. Everyone else follows your word." Clara nodded once. "Understood. No fanfare, no fuss. Just pack." Gunnar looked to each of them again. "This is not a holding pattern. This is not a pause. We stay sharp. We stay fast. We don't wait to get hit. We move first. Anyone sees anything out of place, I want to know." He leaned forward, placing both hands on the table. "We've survived too much to start slipping now." No one disagreed. The room held still for a beat. Then Gunnar stood straight and said quietly, "Meeting adjourned." Chairs slid back. People nodded. Some offered murmured words. The room began to shift. Chairs slid back in quiet sequence, the scrape of metal legs against reinforced flooring oddly gentle for a room built for war. Desiree was the first to move. She didn't salute, she never had to, but she gave Clara a nod, short and clean. "Updates every 6 hours," she said. "I'll keep the rotation tight." Clara met her eyes. "I expect nothing less." Desiree left without another word, boots clicking with the rhythm of someone who always had 3 plans already running. Ashley followed next. She passed Gunnar without hesitation, pausing just long enough to give him a look that didn't need translation. Trust, confidence, and a warning not to push too far too fast. She said quietly, "We'll hold the city." Gunnar nodded once. "I know you will." She was gone before he could say more. Jewel closed her tablet and lingered only a second longer. She looked him over, not the arm, not the posture, not the pain, just him. "I'll pretend I cleared you." "You didn't." "I'm pretending." Then she turned and followed Ashley out. Eli was already halfway to the door, murmuring something to her tablet when she paused. She didn't look back. You so much as jam a piston in that arm, I'll rewire your bladder to your elbow. Comforting, Gunnar said. That's the idea. She walked out, quick steps muttering about rune tolerances. Only Darren remained, leaning casually on the doorframe like he hadn't aged a day in the last 100 battles. He gave Gunnar a slow look, then Clara, then back to Gunnar. You're building up to something, he said. Gunnar didn't blink. Always. Darren scratched his jaw, nodding like he'd expected no other answer. You say the word, he said, and I'll have 10,000 rounds loaded by dawn. Clara raised an eyebrow. Only 10,000? I'm being modest. He gave them a two-fingered salute and vanished into the hallway, leaving behind only the faint scent of sweat, oil, and sarcasm. Now only 3 remained. Gunnar, Clara, Eliana. The room seemed larger without the others, quieter, more dangerous. The door clicked shut behind Darren, and for the first time all morning, the war room was still. Gunnar didn't move, neither did Clara. The soft hum of rune panels filled the silence between them, the kind of silence that didn't demand words, but waited for them anyway. He stared at the map table. Concordia flickered faintly on one side, Murkdust on another. Echo's sigil pulsed at the centre like a heartbeat refusing to stop. Clara stepped forward and rested her palms on the edge of the table beside him. He doesn't know yet, does he? She asked. Gunnar's voice was low. Darren? No. Clara shook her head, a faint breath escaping her nose. He'll pretend he didn't figure it out. That's how he shows respect. He's not the only one, Gunnar said. Clara turned toward him then, really looking. At the lines deeper around his eyes, the tension still buried in his jaw, the way his cybernetic hand flexed even at rest. You're not ready, she said softly. Not as an accusation, just fact. Maybe not, Gunnar admitted, but it doesn't matter. She let the silence sit again. Then, you going with her? He didn't answer with words, he just looked up, and Clara exhaled, slow and steady. I figured, she said. You're not the type to let her face a council full of ancient bastards alone. Gunnar's mouth twitched, not quite a smile. She stood for me, he said. I stand with her. Clara gave a slow nod. And when they try to cage her, I'll break the bars. They stood like that for another long moment, the quiet crackling between them like an old fire. Then Clara stepped away from the table. I've got command. Desera's on my left. Ashley's in Murkdust. Darren's armoured and cocky as usual. She turned to face him. I've got this, Gunnar. Go do what only you can do. Gunnar's gaze held hers, alpha to alpha. Not challenge, not rivalry, and just truth. I know. Clara gave a single firm nod and turned to leave. At the door she paused just long enough to glance back. Tell her soon, she said. She needs to hear it from you, not from the silence. Then she was gone, and Gunnar was no longer the alpha. Not here, not now. Now the wolf would face the guardian, alone. Chapter 4. The Guardian and the Wolf. The war room was quiet again. Clara was gone, the team had scattered. Only the screens hummed, softly pulsing maps and slow-turning ley line projections casting pale light across the room. Gunnar stood at the table, both hands resting against the steel edge, his breath steady, measured, his shadow cut across the runes. He hadn't moved since Clara left. Behind him, Eliana stood still. She hadn't spoken yet. He didn't turn, but he felt her there, like he always did. Finally, she stepped closer, boots silent against the floor. When she stopped beside him, there was only a breath of space between them. Then Gunnar said quietly, I'm going with you. The words weren't dramatic. They didn't need to be. They landed like stone, unchanging, immovable. Eliana turned to face him, brow furrowed. You don't have to... I know, he said, but I'm going. She looked away, jaw tight. The council, I've faced worse. They'll try to paint you as reckless, as a danger. Gunnar met her gaze now. Calm, steady, number. They'll try to paint you as compromised. Her breath caught just slightly. He stepped forward, closing the space. Not with force, but with presence. The kind that said, I will stand beside you no matter what storm is coming. I'm not going to let them tear you down because you chose to save me. Eliana's voice dropped, brittle and barely audible. That's not the only choice I made. Gunnar studied her face, searching, reading the line of her mouth, the flicker of something behind her eyes. He reached for her hand, not fast, not demanding, just there, open, waiting. Her fingers hovered for a second, then curled around his. Not fully, not tightly, but enough. I haven't given you an answer, she whispered, not looking at him. I know, he said. She finally met his gaze, and there it was. Every unspoken truth, every word caught between war and duty. I want to. His breath hitched at that, just a little. But, he asked, voice rough around the edge. But if I cross that line, she said, I don't know if I can go back. You're not meant to go back, Gunnar said. Neither of us are. Eliana stepped closer, close enough to feel the heat of his skin, the tension in his jaw, the way his hand never stopped holding hers, even as his heart tried not to hope too loudly. Her lips hovered near his, just near. Almost. Then she pulled back, slow, careful, deliberate. I need to see what happens in Alfheim first. He nodded once, jaw tight, but he didn't let go of her hand. And she didn't let go of his. They stood in silence, bound by everything unsaid, everything waiting. And together they turned toward the storm. Chapter 5, Claura's Speech. The room was simple, military, personal, quietly worn in all the ways that mattered. His cot was neatly made. Weapons on the wall, organized but accessible. One small photo sat on the shelf near the bed. An old team picture from before the wars got complicated. Gunnar was methodically packing his duffel. Nothing unnecessary. 2 shirts, 1 pair of combat boots, ammunition pouches, enchanted knife, backup rune drive, a comm bead. Last went in the sleek sidearm, restored and polished, even if he didn't remember doing it. He was halfway through checking the strap tension when the door opened without a knock. Of course. Clara leaned against the frame, arms folded, eyebrows already loaded. You think I'm going to let you sneak out without the speech? She said. Gunnar didn't even look up. Figured I had a chance. Wrong again. She stepped into the room like she owned the place, which, for all intents and purposes, she did now. Gunnar kept folding, quieter now. He knew what was coming. Clara took a breath, paced once, and then pointed a finger at him. No starting a war with Alfheim. I wasn't planning to... I said no starting one. That includes glaring at diplomats, making sarcastic comments about their robes, throwing furniture, intimidating any elf who looks sideways at Eliana, or, I don't know, blowing something up because they insulted your eye patch. Gunnar gave a faint grunt. You're not leaving me much room to maneuver. That's the idea, she snapped. She stopped near the bed, watching him zip the bag closed. Then her voice dropped. Also, take care of yourself. Gunnar paused, looked up, met her eyes. She didn't blink. I mean it, she said. You don't have to prove anything over there. Not to them. Not to anyone. If they push you, you let Eliana handle it. You're not the blunt object anymore. He raised a brow. Since when? Clara smirked. Since I started sharpening my edges. He gave a soft, amused snort and slung the duffel over one shoulder. She stepped forward and poked his chest once, not hard but firm. I've got Echo. I've got Earth. I've got this pack. I know, he said quietly. She looked at him a second longer, then sighed. You're still a pain in my ass, Gunnar. I do my best. Try doing your best over there without pissing off an ancient kingdom, all right? He chuckled. And then, because it mattered, she pulled him into a short, firm hug. No words, no warning, just contact. When she pulled back, she punched his shoulder lightly. Come back. I will. You better. Or I'm letting Darren name the 3rd Wolf Mobile Gunnar's Regret. Gunnar groaned. That's cruel and unusual. I'm just getting started, She grinned. He smirked. And then she stepped back, gave him one last look, and let him go. Chapter 6. The Wolf Den. The air down here was cooler, still, earth-scented and quiet, like the world above had slowed to a crawl the moment he crossed the threshold. The lighting was low, dappled by filtered sunlight that poured in through enchanted skylights and a narrow run of stone-carved vents along the wall. Moss clung to sections of the floor. Old blankets. A few scattered bones. A half-shredded leather ball near the far corner. This wasn't a kennel, this was home. The Wolf Den. The place the pack returned to when they were too tired to fight, too wounded to stand, or just needed to breathe where no one asked questions. Gunnar stepped through the arched stone entry and slowed. They were already watching him. Beta lay coiled closest to the door, her silver-grey coat gleaming in the dim light, eyes narrow and unblinking. She didn't growl. She didn't need to. Her gaze alone asked the question, "Why are you here, if you're not ready?" He gave her a small nod, respectful, not cowed. "I'm just checking in." She didn't move. Past her, in the center of the space, Alpha rested on his side atop a thick woven mat. The massive black-furred dire wolf looked like a mountain laid low, still powerful and heavy with presence, even as his breathing remained slow and shallow. His side rose and fell with effort, not struggling but recovering. Wounded but unbowed. One eye opened as Gunnar approached. The good eye, the same side as his own. The two locked gazes. Alpha knew, no words, no sounds, just understanding. Gunnar crouched beside him, setting the duffel down quietly and resting a hand gently against the thick fur of his companion's shoulder. He didn't stroke, didn't pet, just grounded himself there, letting their bond settle back into place. "You'll hold the den while I'm gone," he said softly. Alpha didn't move, but his tail twitched once. Gunnar smiled faintly. "I figured." A quiet snort came from the side. Omega, curled just beside Alpha's back legs, ears flicking as he lifted his head. Still young, still wiry in build compared to his lineage, but growing into the power that simmered in his blood. He padded forward slowly, hesitant, then sat beside Gunnar. Not leaning on him, not asking anything. Just there. Gunnar looked at him, and for the first time that day, the weight cracked through his voice. "Watch them." Omega dipped his head, then without warning he pushed forward and pressed his forehead against Gunnar's chest. Just once. Solid. Brief. Gunnar closed his eyes. When he opened them, Beta had shifted, still silent, but watching the moment with approval, the kind she rarely gave. Gunnar stood slowly, his hand falling away from Alpha's fur. "I'll come back." Alpha didn't blink. He already knew. The pack always comes back. Gunnar slung the duffel over his shoulder and turned toward the exit, casting one last look at all three. Then he walked out, his silhouette framed by the arched stone, swallowed by the light above. Chapter 7. The Crossing. The air in the chamber shimmered with faint static, the kind that always preceded realm travel. The stone walls pulsed with embedded runes, their soft glow cycling in a calm, rhythmic pattern. The portal circle in the floor was alive, yet dormant, waiting. At its center, the gateway frame stood tall, arched, ancient, carved from stone, pulled straight from Alfheim's heart, centuries ago. The etchings had been restored by Eliana herself, just days earlier. Gunnar entered with his duffel slung across one shoulder. He was silent, focused, ready. Eliana was already there, standing before the gate. She wore her guardian cloak, midnight blue trimmed in gold, and her hair was pulled back into a simple braid. Her sword rested on her back, the runes at its hilt faintly glowing in sync with the portal's pulse. She turned when she heard him. Didn't smile, didn't need to. Their eyes met. "You're late," she said softly. "I had to say goodbye to someone." She nodded once, and together they stepped onto the portal ring. Gunnar stood beside her, not behind, not ahead. Equal. Eli's interface activated behind the control console, her voice crackling through the intercom. Portal calibrated. You've got a clean line to Alfheim. Signal tether confirmed. Gunnar didn't answer. Eliana glanced toward the controls. We're ready. The runes surged, light rising like a tide around the arch. The air warped inward, folding in on itself until the space inside the frame cracked open, revealing swirling mist, pale starlight, and the faint scent of rain on old stone. Alfheim. Gunnar shifted his grip on the strap of his bag. Eliana drew in a quiet breath. Then, together, without a word, they stepped through. The shift was instant. One step through the portal and the world changed. Gone were the steel walls, hum of machinery, and scent of oil from the workshop. In their place, crisp mountain air, soft golden sunlight filtering through towering silver-leaved trees, and the distant echo of bells carried by wind. They stood at the edge of a polished stone courtyard, cut into the cliffs of Alfheim's inner sanctum. Ancient statues lined the outer ring, guardians of old, their eyes turned skyward, weapons buried blade down in reverent silence. And waiting there, hands folded, posture tall, was Melorion. His robes were a flowing mix of deep green and starlight silver, embroidered with runes that shimmered faintly as he moved. His expression was unreadable at first, but when he saw Eliana, his shoulders relaxed by the smallest degree. "Guardian Vale," he said, his voice like distant thunder muted by forest fog. She stepped forward and bowed, low, proper, disciplined. "Counselor." Gunnar stayed where he was, watching, reading, not defiant but grounded. His hand brushed the edge of his coat where his weapon usually sat. Not a threat, just habit. Mylorion's gaze drifted to him, and for the barest moment, something flickered in those ageless eyes. Recognition, calculation, maybe even respect. "You walk boldly, Wolf of Echo," he said. "I walk beside her," Gunnar replied simply. Melorion gave the faintest smile. Not approval, something quieter, older. He stepped closer to Eliana and lowered his voice, not so soft Gunnar couldn't hear, but clearly meant for her. "The council meets at high sun tomorrow, noon. They expect your presence." Eliana's jaw tightened, just slightly. "Understood." Maelorion's gaze softened, not with pity, but with something deeper. A kind of weight only those who'd once stood where she now stood could offer. He reached out, lightly placing a hand on her shoulder. "You are not the first to stand before them with fire in your chest," he said, "but you are the first I've believed might survive it." Her breath caught. Gunnar's eyes narrowed, not in suspicion, but in quiet defense. He was reading everything. Mylorion noticed, and he turned just slightly toward him. "She will need your strength tomorrow, but she must speak alone." Gunnar gave a nod. "Then I'll wait outside." Melorion studied him for a beat longer, then nodded once in return. "I will have quarters prepared," he said, "and food. You've both travelled far." He stepped back, robes trailing behind him like leaves carried on wind. Then, as he turned to lead them inward, his voice drifted back, softer now, warmer. "Come. For now you are guests, and the storm is still a day away." The hallways of the citadel were carved from living crystal and moonstone, humming faintly with magic older than most empires. Light poured from no torches, just soft ambient glows set into the walls, like starlight caught in glass. Melorion walked ahead, his steps nearly silent despite the weight of his robes. Behind him Gunnar and Eliana followed, not speaking, both taking in the space, the silence, the carefully curated sense of peace that always felt one breath away from judgment. They reached a curve in the hall. 2 doors stood side by side. Melorion gestured lightly. "Separate quarters, but neighbouring. If you require anything, speak the word Seren aloud. The attendants will hear you." Eliana gave a curt nod. "Thank you, Counselor." He looked at her for a long moment, something unreadable in his eyes. Then he turned to go. But Gunnar spoke, voice low. Melorian. The elder elf paused, half turning. Gunner's tone was respectful but edged with steel. When you have a moment tonight, I'd like a word, just the two of us. Malorion studied him, expression unreadable. Then, finally, after the moon climbs. He nodded once to Gunner, then again to Eliana, and glided down the hall, his silhouette swallowed by the citadel's twisting light. Gunner stood there a beat longer staring after him. Eliana turned to her door, fingers grazing the carved rune embedded near the handle. Was that wise? She asked softly, not quite facing him. No, Gunner replied, but it was necessary. She didn't argue. They lingered there, one heartbeat longer than needed. Then, without another word, they each entered their rooms. The doors closed, and Alfheim's long night began. Chapter 8. The Shrine. The guest room was quiet, simple. Elven architecture knew when to be ornate and when to honour silence. A single arched window let in starlight that shimmered like liquid silver across the polished floor. Gunnar sat on the edge of the low, rune-carved bed, still half-dressed. The duffel sat untouched by the wall. His jacket hung neatly from the corner post. He hadn't unpacked. He hadn't even moved. He was staring at nothing. A soft knock broke the stillness. He stood, not startled, just aware, and moved to the door. When it opened, she was already stepping forward. Eliana, cloak removed, shoulders bare in a simple deep blue tunic. Her braid had loosened, and her expression was unreadable, but her voice, when she spoke, was low, measured. There's a shrine 2 levels down, one of the older ones, forgotten by most. Gunnar studied her, saying nothing. She didn't fidget, didn't explain. I thought, she said finally, you might want to come with me. A beat passed. His voice rough but quiet. To meditate? She nodded once. It's peaceful there. Clean. The noise doesn't reach it. He looked past her to the hallway, then back to her eyes. It's been a long time. I know. He exhaled slowly. Then just a faint tilt of his head. Lead the way. The chamber was small, round, and carved from a pale golden stone that seemed to breathe light. Vines crept in from a narrow skylight above, letting moonlight spill in like a waterfall. There were no icons, no symbols, only space. At the centre of the shrine sat a shallow stone pool, its water perfectly still. The kind that didn't reflect what you looked like, but who you were. Eliana stepped forward and knelt by the pool. Gunnar followed, more slowly, more hesitant. Not out of discomfort, out of memory. He sat across from her, cross-legged, hands resting on his knees, his eye closed. The rhythm of his breath began to slow. She watched him at first, not judging, just witnessing. You used to do this, she said softly, before everything. I used to believe it mattered, he replied, not bitter, just honest. It still does, she said. A long silence stretched between them, filled only by breath and the hum of quiet magic built into the stone. His breathing deepened. For the first time in years, Gunnar let go of his grip on the war outside and began to listen for the stillness inside. Eliana's voice, almost a whisper, let the noise fall away. He didn't answer. He didn't need to, because here, finally, he did. And she was there, holding space for him. Not as guardian, not as council emissary, but just as her. They sat across from one another in the small shrine, stone floor cool beneath them, moonlight slanting through the open skylight above. The water between them was still. No words passed for a long while. Gunnar's breathing slowed. The old rhythms returned, not forced, not armoured, just still. Eliana watched him, quietly, proudly. And then he opened his eye. I ever tell you the first thing I thought when I saw you? He asked softly. She tilted her head. When? In the woods, he said. Back on Earth. Years ago, after your fight with Ultranacious. Eliana looked down briefly. That memory lived in her bones. I was barely conscious, she murmured. Didn't even know where I was. I did, Gunnar said, and you scared the hell out of me. That earned a flicker of a smile. He continued, voice lower now. You were lying in the clearing, sunlight bleeding through the branches. Blood all over you, burn marks along your arms. Your cloak was torn to hell. She met his eyes, calm but focused. And I thought, he said, that's a wingless angel. Eliana blinked. You never said that. I know. His voice was dry. Didn't seem like the moment for poetry. She looked at him for a long time. Why? Gunnar shrugged. Because I've been through war, seen monsters, lost good people, and somehow, in the middle of all that, there was you, collapsed, wrecked, dying, and still the most beautiful thing I'd ever seen. The air between them changed. Eliana didn't flinch, didn't deflect, but her voice came softer. You saved me. He shook his head. You saved yourself. I just picked you up. She reached across the still water, no hesitation this time, and lightly touched the chain around his neck. Drew out the talisman she'd given him long ago. It shimmered faintly in the shrine's light. You still wear it, she whispered. Always. She studied the silver. I tied my true name to this. I know. You shouldn't be able to keep it this long. He looked her in the eyes. I think it knows I was never planning to let go. Her fingers brushed against his, resting on the pendant between them. They didn't need more words. That forest those years ago had changed everything. And now, sitting in stillness once again, they both remembered exactly how and why they ever found each other in the first place. Her fingers still touched his, resting lightly against the pendant. Neither of them moved. The silence wasn't heavy, it was full. The kind of stillness that happens just before the world changes. Eliana looked at him, eyes searching, not for doubt, but for permission. She found none, only truth. Gunnar's voice was low, steady. You don't have to say anything. She answered with a breath. I don't need to. And then, slowly, deliberately, she leaned across the pool. Not fast, not questioning. And Gunnar met her halfway. The kiss wasn't rushed. It wasn't fragile. It was grounded, steady. Like the two of them had always known they'd get here, just didn't know when. No desperation, just a deep, quiet recognition. When they parted, their foreheads lingered together, breath mingling in the hush. His hand still rested on the talisman between them, her fingers curled around it. And in that moment, with nothing but the soft sounds of distant wind and the breath of an ancient shrine around them. They finally stopped running. Let's turn. The kiss deepened, slow but sure. No hesitation, no holding back. Eliana leaned in fully now, her hands finding his chest as if instinct knew what duty always denied. Gunnar's fingers slid to her jaw, calloused and careful, not commanding, anchoring, as if to say, you're safe here, with me. The magic between them hummed, not cast, not forced, just present, and for a moment, just a moment, the world outside the shrine disappeared. She shifted closer. His hand moved to her waist, thumb grazing the fabric at her side. Her breath hitched. Years of silence melted against that kiss. Every moment spent pretending they didn't feel it, every stolen glance, every battle survived just to see each other again. It all lived right there between them. And then, a sharp cry echoed from somewhere above, high, piercing, a nightbird in the trees. Both of them froze, still close, foreheads brushing. Eliana blinked, her breathing unsteady. She smiled, just a little. Not shy, aware. Weren't you supposed to meet with Malorian? She tilted her head, lips still close. Like now? Gunnar's groan was low and reluctant. Pretty sure I was hoping you forgot. Eliana pulled back slowly, smoothing her tunic, though her heartbeat was still clearly catching up. I don't forget, she said, standing. No, he murmured, standing to match her. You don't. She turned toward the shrine's door, pausing just before stepping into the corridor, then over her shoulder. Don't keep him waiting, Gunnar. And with that, she vanished into the soft curve of the hall, her presence still lingering like starlight in the shrine. Gunnar stood alone a moment longer, steadying himself. Then he exhaled. Of course not, he muttered. Wouldn't want to piss off both guardians in the same night. Chapter 9. Bench Duty. The corridor outside the shrine was quiet, lit only by soft lantern light and the silver sheen of moon through narrow windows carved in elven stone. Melorion sat on a polished wooden bench along the wall, hands folded in his lap, posture regal, but clearly relaxed. He didn't look up as Eliana stepped out, though the corner of his mouth curved just slightly. She paused, just for a second, then, without a word, gave a small nod. Not ashamed, not apologizing, acknowledging. Melorion returned it, calm and unreadable, but his eyes twinkled just enough to say, I was young once too. She moved on in silence, her footsteps soft against the stone. Moments later, Gunnar emerged, adjusting the collar of his shirt and doing his best not to look like a man who'd just been thoroughly kissed by a guardian. He spotted Melorion immediately. There was a long beat of silence. Then Gunnar cleared his throat. She was, helping me meditate. Melorion finally looked up, eyes sharp beneath the weight of centuries. A pause, then a dry smile. Seemed very centering. Gunnar exhaled, one hand brushing his beard. Yeah, well, not quite the breathing pattern I remember, but it got the job done. Melorion gave a small chuckle, then gestured to the empty space beside him. Do you feel up for a walk, Gunnar? Or would you rather sit and talk like two men too stubborn to sleep? Gunnar tilted his head slightly, one brow raised. Depends, he said. You planning on giving me answers tonight, or just riddles with long pauses? Melorion smiled, the kind that held both invitation and warning. Let's find out. The corridor opened into a quiet stone path that wound through one of the citadel's upper terraces. Gardens bloomed in orderly symmetry around them, soft moonlight gleaming off the silver-leaf trees. Lanterns hung from curved posts, flickering with magic-fed fire. Melorion walked beside Gunnar, his hands clasped behind his back, robes whispering with each step. They walked in silence at first. Then Gunnar spoke, his tone even. I want to address the council. Melorion raised a brow but didn't stop. They expect Eliana at midday, he said. I know, Gunnar replied. I'll speak before that, before they start picking apart her loyalty. Melorion was quiet a moment longer. You understand, he said finally, that your presence is already unprecedented. Gunnar nodded. Good. Then they'll remember it when I speak. Another pause. Then Melorion gave a quiet, almost amused breath. Very well. I'll arrange it. Gunnar inclined his head slightly. Thank you. But, Melorion added, there is one condition. Gunnar glanced at him sideways. You'll need to wear the ceremonial robes of Alfheim while addressing them, the elder said, voice utterly composed. It is tradition. Gunnar stopped walking, turned. You want me to wear a dress to make my point? Melorion smiled just slightly. I said robes, not a dress. He gestured ahead, calm as ever. They're fitted, regal, tailored with honor, not submission. Gunnar looked at him for a long beat. You're serious. As a heartstone. Gunnar narrowed his eye, still not moving. You're really telling me? No weapons, no armor, and you want me wrapped in silk when I walk into a room full of people who'd love to see me fail? Melorion turned to face him fully, hands still folded behind his back. It is not a show of weakness, he said calmly. It is a declaration that you are willing to speak with truth, not steel. The council respects strength, but they bow only to restraint. Gunnar scoffed. I don't carry weapons for intimidation. No, Maelorian said. You carry them because you've never had the luxury not to. A long pause passed between them. Then Gunnar flexed his left arm, the cybernetic one, and let the metallic plates shift just enough to expose the faint outline of the embedded silver blade near the wrist. I assume you're aware this doesn't come off. Maelorion inclined his head slightly. I am. And the blade? I will make an exception, he replied, on the condition that it remains sheathed and unseen. Gunnar considered that. That's a lot of trust you're asking for. Maelorion met his gaze directly. Number, it's the same trust you're asking of them. The air between them held steady. Finally, Gunnar exhaled through his nose, a breath that wasn't quite surrender, but wasn't refusal either. I want to see the robe first, he muttered. Maelorion smiled faintly, a rare crack of amusement in the marble. I'll have the tailor meet you in the morning. They had resumed walking, steps quiet on the smooth stone path, the gardens on either side rustling with night wind. For a while, Gunnar said nothing. Then, without looking over, he spoke. There's another tradition, on Earth. Maelorion arched a brow slightly. Oh? Gunnar nodded once, still facing forward. When a man wants to marry a woman, it's custom to ask her father for permission. Maelorion slowed, not stopping, but the rhythm of his stride shifted. I'm aware of it, he said carefully. Gunnar looked over now, expression sober. I know Aeliana doesn't have a father in the way we'd call it, but you're the closest thing she's got. He let that settle. I've already asked her, he added. She hasn't answered yet. Maelorion studied him, pace slowing until they came to a quiet overlook in the path. Below, the city of Alfheim shimmered in soft moonlight, ancient and enduring. Gunnar turned toward him fully now. No armor, no weapons, no shield, just him. So I'm asking you, he said, not because I need your approval, but because she deserves that respect, and I know what she means to you. A long silence followed. Maelorion's expression didn't change, but something in his posture softened. Just enough. You would bind yourself to her, he said, knowing the weight she carries, the vows she's made, the life she must live. I already have, Gunnar replied. I'm just waiting to see if she'll bind herself to me. The stars overhead shimmered, and Maelorion, the ancient, unshakable guardian, gave a slow, quiet nod. Then you have my blessing, Wolf of Earth. Maelorion remained still for a long time, hands clasped lightly in front of him as he watched the moonlight spill across the upper terrace. His voice, when it came, was quiet, measured, not withholding but carrying weight. You understand, of course, he said, that there has never been a bond like this. Gunnar stayed silent. No human from Earth has ever been joined to a guardian, and no elf, no guardian, has ever given themselves over to a life beyond the vow. Maelorion turned now, his gaze sharp, not accusatory but searching. She was trained from the time she could walk to belong to the realms, to hold the line between them, to serve something larger than self. Gunnar nodded. I know. Do you? Maelorion pressed, not unkindly. Because what you're asking her to do, what you are doing just by asking, may force her to give up the identity she has spent centuries defending. He paused, his voice dropping slightly. She will be questioned, challenged. Some will say she has been compromised. Others will try to tear her down just to prove the guardian oath can be broken. Gunnar's jaw tightened. Then let them come. But Maelorion raised a hand. I've watched the two of you for a long time, he said. From a distance at first, then closer, when the war made it necessary. His gaze softened, not with warmth but with reverence. What you share is not simple. It's not man and woman. It's not elf and human. It's something older, a resonance between two forces that should never have crossed paths, and yet did. Another pause. You're not just binding hearts, Gunnar. You are binding realms. And that comes with scrutiny, pressure, weight neither of you can fully predict. He stepped closer now, close enough that Gunnar could see the silver strands threaded through his hair, the age in his eyes that no spell could mask. So, before I tell you again that you have my blessing, I will ask you this. Can you carry that weight? Not just for her, but for everything she stands for. Gunnar didn't answer right away. He stood at the edge of the overlook, shoulders squared, but something in his posture shifted. Not softer, just stripped of all the armor no one could ever see. I never told anyone what I saw that day, he said. Maelorion remained silent. Gunnar's voice was low, gravel thick with memory. She was lying in the forest. Trees were scorched around her. The air smelled like burned ozone and blood. I'd been tracking magical signatures from the rift fallout. I thought maybe a Black Dawn weapon had gone rogue. He exhaled through his nose. Instead, I found her. His gaze dropped to the ground, but not in shame. She wasn't just injured. She was gone. Her pulse was paper thin. Her body was covered in burns, bones out of alignment. I thought she was a ghost. Or an illusion. Something left behind. He swallowed. But then she breathed. He reached under his shirt, pulled the talisman free. It shimmered faintly in the starlight, catching between his fingers as though it recognized what was coming. I carried her back to my cabin, hid her from the world, fed her broth with my bare hands because she couldn't lift her own. His hand tightened around the chain. She didn't speak for days, but I sat with her every damn night, didn't even know her name, just called her stranger. He looked at Maelorion now, really looked at him. I didn't know what she was, or what she'd fought. I didn't care. Then his hand lifted the talisman higher, the silver pendant resting in his palm. And when she gave me this, I didn't understand the weight of it. Not at first. Not until she told me what it was, that it held her true name, that it meant trust, that it meant everything. He stared at it now, and then, softly, barely above a whisper but with perfect clarity, he spoke the name. Aelialin Tavara. Maelorion's eyes widened just slightly. The talisman pulsed in Gunnar's hand, catching moonlight like a living flame. I've carried that name, Gunnar said, through every battle, through every lie, every loss. I've bled with it, I've lived by it, and if it came to it, he paused, I'd die with it on my lips. The wind rustled the garden trees around them, like even the world knew to fall quiet. Gunnar looked up again, voice steady. So yes, I can carry the weight. The garden fell silent. Gunnar's words still echoed in the air, the talisman warm in his hand. Maelorion didn't speak, couldn't. There was nothing to say yet. But something shifted, a flicker of magic, a hum in the air. And then, she was there. Eliana stepped from the shadows just beyond the path, moonlight catching in her hair, her expression unreadable, but her eyes already wet. She had heard him, she'd felt it, because that was the rule. If he needed her, truly needed her, he was to hold the talisman and speak her true name. And he had. Slowly she stepped forward. Gunnar turned toward her. Not surprised, just still, just present. The talisman in his hand glowed faintly between them. He swallowed, voice low and hoarse. I didn't mean to call you. You did, she whispered, stepping closer. I wasn't done talking, he said, but maybe you needed to hear the rest too. He held her gaze now, fully. No deflection, no sarcasm, just truth. I'm not good at this part, he began. You know that. She nodded once silently. But when I found you in those woods, I wasn't rescuing a stranger. I just didn't know that yet. His hand clenched around the talisman. Since that day, there hasn't been a single night, not one, that I haven't looked at this and remembered what it meant. That you trusted me. That you gave me a piece of yourself. His breath shook now. But he didn't stop. And I've never said it out loud. Not fully, not like this. So, he took a step forward. Close now. Close enough that the air between them trembled. Elialin Tavara, he said again, voice breaking just slightly. You are my anchor, my fire, my damn compass when everything else goes to hell. And I know the realms may never allow us what we want. I know the council may push back. I know your vow still stands. He reached out and gently placed the talisman against her chest. But I'm standing here now, no weapons, no armor, just me. And I'm saying, if you want me, I'm yours. A beat. I don't need a crown. I don't need a ceremony. I don't even need an answer tonight. I just need you to know. You've had all of me for a long damn time, and I'm not taking it back. Tears slipped down her cheeks. She didn't hide them. Not this time. Behind them, Maelorian remained still, stone-faced yet reverent, a witness to history. But Gunnar didn't break his gaze from her. He stood there, silent, unshaking, offered. The silence stretched between them, full of the things she had never said. Eliana reached up, fingers trembling as she touched the talisman where he'd placed it against her chest. Her voice came soft, but clear. When I opened my eyes, in your cabin, I thought I had died. Gunnar's expression shifted, but he didn't interrupt. I thought the gods had taken me, that I was in the afterworld. Everything was pain and haze. But then, she stepped closer, eyes locked to his. Then I saw you, sitting beside me, cleaning the blood from my hands, talking like I could hear you, like I mattered. Her voice cracked, but she kept going. You were the first thing I saw, and in that moment, Gunnar, I didn't care if I was dead. I just didn't want to stop looking at you. His breath hitched. Eliana wiped at her cheek but didn't try to stop the tears. And when you left to fight Ultranacious the first time, her voice grew quieter now. I wanted to stop you. I wanted to follow you, but I couldn't. I couldn't break the oath. She drew a deep, trembling breath. But it tore at me. She reached out now, hand resting lightly against his chest. And when I couldn't go with you, I made sure someone would. I had already started training Clara. I knew you'd need someone beside you when the world fell apart. I prepared her for you, because I had to believe you would survive long enough to meet her. A pause. Her hand pressed a little more firmly against his chest. I had to trust in you, not as a warrior, not as the wolf, but as you. She looked up now, and her voice was no longer trembling. It was truth. I have loved you for a long time, Gunnar, and I was too much the guardian to say it. A beat, but I'm not just the guardian tonight. Eliana didn't look away. Her fingers still rested over the talisman. Her eyes held nothing back. I never stopped helping you, she said, voice low but steady. Gunnar furrowed his brow slightly. There were times, she went on, when I stretched the lines of the guardian vow, when I sent whispers through neutral channels, when I moved supplies that just happened to end up in your hands, when I guided others to stand with you without ever saying your name. She looked down, her jaw tightening. The council knew, Maelorian knew, and they reprimanded me more than once. Gunnar's eye darkened. They punished you? For that? She shook her head. They reminded me of my duty, of the balance, of what I swore to protect. Then she looked up again. But I knew what I was doing, and I'd do it again. Her voice was stronger now, unshaking. Because you were worth it. The pack was worth it. Every life you protected, every realm you kept from falling. She turned then. Both she and Gunnar looked at Maelorion. The Elder Guardian stood quietly beneath the silver glow of the terrace, his expression unreadable, but his eyes softened. You saw that, Eliana said gently, even when you couldn't say it, even when the council wouldn't admit it. She stepped forward, hand still on Gunnar's chest, but her gaze on the man who had watched over her for centuries. "You've known for a long time that this wasn't just loyalty," she said. "You've seen what it's become." The air was still, sacred, and Maelorian finally spoke. Maelorian stood still for a moment longer. Then slowly he moved toward them, his footsteps silent on the stone. The moonlight caught in his silvered hair, making him look even more ancient than he already did. But his eyes held something young. "I've only told this story once," he said, "and that was to the stars, when I knew no one was listening." Gunnar and Eliana both turned fully to face him. Maelorian looked past them for a moment, into the gardens, into memory. "Her name was Thalira," he said, "a bard." Eliana's eyes widened slightly. "I met her long before you were born," he said, glancing at her. "Before you took your oath, before the war of echoes, before I wore these robes." "She had a soul like fire," he continued, "laughed too loud, sang songs that annoyed half the council, and once challenged me to a duel with spoons after I accused her stew of being over-salted." A breath of a smile passed his lips. "I should have left her after a week. I stayed for a decade." He looked down at his hands. "And then, the realms began to fracture. The council summoned me. A war was brewing in the shadow reaches. I was told to return, to recommit, to choose the path." He met Eliana's eyes now, and there was no distance in his voice, only honesty. "I chose the vow." His voice was steady, but the ache beneath it was undeniable. "I told her we were never meant to last, that it was a kindness to end it before duty took everything else from me. She didn't cry. She didn't beg. She just said one thing." He looked between them now. "You'll keep the realms from falling, Maelorian, but it will never sing for you again." Silence. He let that hang in the air. Then, softly, "I've served 500 years since that day, held the balance, protected the gates, advised queens, chained kings." A beat. "But there is not a morning, not a single dawn, where I do not wonder what song she might have written, had I let myself choose differently." He stepped closer, now speaking not just as counselor, but as something older. "I look at you both, and I see what I once turned away from, but I also see something I did not have." He looked to Gunnar. "You are not trying to take her from this path." He turned to Eliana. "And you are not trying to run from it." Another pause. "What you are building may not just survive the vow, it may strengthen it." His voice dropped to a near whisper. "So if either of you are waiting for my permission, know this." He placed a hand gently on Eliana's shoulder. "You already have the thing I gave away, and it is more powerful than any vow I ever took." Eliana stepped forward, saying nothing. Gunnar didn't move. He didn't have to. She slid into his arms like she'd always belonged there, like the years between them had simply bent in half and brought them home. No kisses, no dramatics, just the silence of truth, and a bond that didn't need declaring anymore. Behind them, Maelorion turned. He took a few steps toward the far corridor, robes whispering against stone. Then, over his shoulder, casual as wind, "The tailor will be at your room at first light." Gunnar didn't react, but Eliana blinked. She glanced up at him, mouth parting just slightly as if to ask, "What tailor?" But then she stopped herself. Instead, she let her head rest against his chest again. No questions. Not tonight. The gardens were quiet now. Even the wind had grown still, as if the very air respected the moment that had just passed. Eliana and Gunnar walked side by side, the silence between them warm now, no longer tense or unspoken, just comfortable. His hand brushed hers as they moved through the soft-lit corridor. Not asking, not taking, just being there. And she didn't pull away. No guards shadowed their steps, no council eyes, just the hush of moonlight against ancient stone and the faint echo of their boots on the polished floors. They reached their doors set just beside one another. For a beat, neither moved. Then Eliana turned slightly, her voice barely above a whisper. "Good night, Wolf of Earth." Gunnar smiled faintly, one corner of his mouth pulling up. "Good night, Guardian of Alfheim." Her eyes lingered on his for a moment longer. Then she slipped inside her room, the door closing softly behind her. Gunnar stood there a moment, alone now in the quiet hall. He exhaled, slow, full, and turned toward his own door. Tomorrow the council. Tomorrow the robes. But tonight, he'd finally been seen. Chapter 10. Meanwhile, back at the workshop. The blast was small, controlled, probably, but it still rattled every pipe in the north wing of the workshop and sent a very distressed flock of messenger birds shrieking off the rooftop. Inside, the air smelled like scorched copper and questionable choices. Darren stood triumphantly atop a metal crate, goggles pushed up on his head, shirt dusted with soot, grinning like a man who'd just invented gravity. "It worked!" he shouted. Somewhere under the Wolfmobile's chassis, Caleb's voice echoed back, muffled and not remotely impressed. "What the hell did you do?" "Modified the voltage regulation conduit," Darren called down, like that should have made everything make sense. It did not. There was a loud snap of electricity from the far corner, followed by a very unamused voice over the intercom. "Darren, if you rerouted power from my workbench again, I swear by the stars of Solarius." Eli, still upstairs, still pissed, probably holding a wrench in one hand and a spell glove in the other. Darren held up his hands in mock surrender, but the grin didn't fade. "Test fire went exactly like I planned," he said to no one in particular. A pipe in the ceiling hissed ominously. From behind a workbench, a small explosion of sparks rained down onto the floor. Darren just nodded at it. That one was for dramatic effect. The workshop doors banged open with a dramatic clatter, followed by the unmistakable click of boots and the sharp rustle of goblin leather armour. Argos strode in like she owned the damn place, dragging behind her a half-busted satchel stuffed with glowing trinkets, metal shards, and what looked suspiciously like a cracked mana core. "Eli!" she shouted without missing a step. "Your favourite gremlin's back, and I brought you presents. Also, I need 6 feet of spell thread, 2 arcane fuses, and something that doesn't explode when I sneeze near it." She paused halfway into the chaos, eyes squinting through the lingering haze of smoke and what might have been ozone. What in the 9 sparks of discord happened in here? Darren turned slowly on his crate, arms crossed like a villain in a low-budget play. "Argos," he said solemnly. "You've arrived just in time to witness scientific history." "Right," she deadpanned, surveying the cables on the floor and the very stressed-looking pipe hissing behind him. "That's what this is? History?" Looked more like a half-baked power surge and a cry for attention. From under the Wolfmobile, Caleb muttered just loud enough to be heard. "Please tell me you brought sedatives." Argos dropped her satchel with a loud clang, grinning. "Nope, but I did bring an unopened bottle of swamp root shine from Merc Dust." From above, Eli's voice cut in again, dry, sharp, and more than a little annoyed. "Unless that bottle's enchanted with an anti-idiot barrier, it's not going to help me right now." Argos looked up toward the second-floor balcony. "Put it on the list, Eli. Enchanting booze, top priority." Then she turned back to Darren, hands on her hips. "So, what exactly did you blow up this time?" Darren grinned, wiping grease across his already ruined shirt. "Technically. Nothing. Yet." Caleb muttered from under the chassis. "Give it time." Darren stepped back and patted the side of the machine like it was a prized racehorse. "Wolfmobile 2 is officially born." Argos raised a brow. "It's uglier than the first one." "It's breathing," Caleb added. "That's the win." Just then, Eli appeared in the open bay doorway, stopping dead at the scene of 3 soot-smeared lunatics and a heavily modded death cart humming with magic, diesel, and bad decisions. She crossed her arms. Okay, which catastrophe are we tempting today? Engine install's done, Darren said brightly. Moment of truth. Eli's brow arched. So this is the part where it catches fire, explodes, or rips open a portal to the wrong realm? Caleb didn't look up. He's betting it runs clean for 5 minutes. You've never built anything that worked on the first try, Eli said, flat. Darren pointed at her with mock offence. Exactly why I'm betting. 5 flawless minutes. No smoke, no sparks, no fatalities. Eli's grin curled, wicked. What's the wager? A night out, Darren said. Winner picks the spot, the food, the entire vibe. Oh, good, Eli purred. Because when I win, you're going to a silent, enchanted cafe where they only serve tea and talk about post-arcane theory over candlelight. Darren grinned wider. And when I win, we're going to the loudest, dirtiest dive bar this side of the realm, and I swear I will make you 2-step barefoot. Caleb rolled his eyes. You two need hobbies. Darren laid a hand on the dash, whispered a sarcastic prayer to the gods of diesel and recklessness, and cranked the ignition. The Wolfmobile roared to life, a perfect growl, no sputter, no flames. Stabilizers glowed a steady blue. Caleb checked his watch. Timer's running. Eli folded her arms. Any second now? But the minutes ticked by. Smooth, clean, functional. At exactly 6 minutes. Woomph! Small fire, right on cue. Darren grabbed the extinguisher, spraying wildly. Still counts! Eli barked. You set it on fire! Caleb shrugged. Ran for 5 minutes. Terms are terms. That's right, Darren whooped, triumphant. Victory, baby! Eli scowled. I hate you. Darren turned to Argos. Hope you like sparkles. We're going to the Crossway Lounge. Keebler's buying. Argos's eyes lit up. Is that the place with chandeliers and glitter drinks? Caleb drained his thermos. Also a strip club. Darren winked. Oops, forgot to mention that part. From outside the garage, Eli's voice came like a thunderclap. Darren! He was already halfway out the side door. No takebacks, Keebler. Sparkle night is happening. Caleb watched him go, shook his head once, and murmured, absolutely worth it. The fire was out. The Wolfmobile still smoked faintly. Less like a machine in crisis, more like it was embarrassed. Tools were scattered. The garage was a mess. But the job was done. Caleb locked up the back toolbox with a soft click, slung his jacket over one shoulder, and gave the half-lit chaos a final glance. Let's go before Eli changes her mind and locks the doors. I heard that, came Eli's voice from somewhere deeper in the garage. She emerged a moment later, hair tied back, spell glove clipped to her belt, looking way too ready for whatever the night had in store. I'm going purely for evidence, she declared, and if Darren gets kicked out for touching a chandelier again, I am not covering bail. Darren, freshly cleaned up and already wearing his best questionable shirt, gave a mock salute. Ma'am, I plan on getting kicked out for at least 3 things, but I promise the chandelier is 4th on the list. Top 5 goals, Argos added, hopping up to walk beside him. Can we ride in the Wolfmobile? Nope, Caleb said. Still technically on fire. Argos snapped her fingers. Next time. As they made their way out into the night, the garage lights flicked off behind them one by one. The stars were out. The wind was cool. Somewhere music thumped in the distance. The pack, well, most of it, was off duty, just for one night. And for once, that might be enough. Chapter 11. Charm in the Neon Light. The door to the Crossway Lounge swung open with a rush of neon light and bass-heavy music. Darren stepped in like he owned the place, because judging by the greeting he got, he kind of did. Look who's back, one of the dancers purred from across the stage, her grin widening. Hey there, heartbreaker. Caleb arched a brow. Heartbreaker? Don't encourage it, Eli muttered, adjusting the collar of her jacket as she scanned the crowd. Her blonde hair was down tonight, part of the disguise. The glowing bracer glove on her wrist stayed hidden beneath the sleeve. Darren grinned, unbothered. I tip well, what can I say? Argos bounced beside him, her eyes sparkling as she took in the glitter lights, rhinestone-covered furniture, and literal smoke machines. Oh my stars, this place is amazing! Try not to lick anything, Eli deadpanned. They made their way to a private table near the edge of the stage. A dancer was already finishing her set, a whirlwind of confidence and flexibility. The crowd cheered. Darren dropped into the booth like a man arriving at church. "This is sacred ground," he said, nodding solemnly. Caleb gave a quiet laugh. "You're impossible." Drinks arrived. Greasy snacks followed. They ordered a round, then another. Laughter started to replace suspicion. Darren told increasingly exaggerated stories about past visits. Caleb played the straight man to every outrageous detail, and Eli slowly relaxed, sipping something neon that smelled like citrus and ozone. Argos, encouraged by both the atmosphere and a glowing cocktail that came with edible glitter, eventually leapt onto the edge of the stage during a lull and mimicked one of the dancers with chaotic goblin flair. The crowd went wild. Even the staff didn't stop her. Darren hooted like a man unchained. Caleb just rested his head in one hand. "We're going to get banned." "Or knighted," Darren offered. Argos spun in a circle, nearly knocking over a low-hanging light fixture. "You said there'd be a chandelier." "There was a chandelier," Caleb muttered. "It left when it saw you coming." Moments later, a new dancer stepped onto the stage. Velvet. She moved like the shadows were hers. Fluid, composed, eyes half-lidded beneath the spotlight. The crew watched, each reacting in their own way. Darren leaned forward slightly, clearly impressed. Caleb raised an eyebrow, quietly thoughtful. "Huh, she's good." Argos, back in her seat and breathless, clapped her hands softly. "I want her boots. And the ceiling sparkles. And the boots again." Eli didn't say anything. Not yet. And then, just before Velvet stepped off stage, her eyes brushed past their booth. And paused. Darren caught it. "She clocked us," he murmured. Caleb nodded once. "She did." It wasn't until she approached their table, closer now, closer than the glow of the stage, that Eli's eyes caught the flicker of light across Darren's neck. The charm she'd given him, glowing, subtle but unmistakable. Eli's breath caught slightly. Her expression tightened. That wasn't supposed to happen, not without magic nearby. Velvet leaned in, voice syrup smooth. "Evening, boys. Lady. Heard there was a winner in need of celebration." Darren raised a brow. "Guilty as charged." Argos practically bounced in her seat. "Can we do the chandelier thing now, or is that rude?" Eli kept her voice even. "Charm's reacting." Caleb glanced sideways. "To her?" Eli nodded once. "Yeah." And she noticed. Velvet's eyes dipped toward the charm for just a second. Noticed, but didn't flinch. That wasn't normal. Then came the offer, a private dance. Darren naturally accepted. But when Eli cut in and said, "I'll pay double," even Velvet blinked. "Private booth, just us," Eli added. Her tone left no room for argument. Caleb blinked slowly. Argos looked like she was watching a game show. Velvet tilted her head, smile still in place. "Well, all right then. This way, darling." They disappeared into the private booth. Darren slouched back into the booth seat, smirking. "We are so gonna get yelled at for this." Caleb shrugged. "Probably." Argos leaned on the table, staring at the velvet curtain. "So, do you think she's a spy? Or like maybe a cursed princess?" Darren snorted. "Could go either way." From behind the curtain, nothing could be heard. 10 minutes later, Eli returned. She didn't say anything right away. Just grabbed her drink, took a long pull, and dropped back into her seat. For a while, no one asked. The music thumped around them. Their drinks were refilled. The lights danced. Caleb finally glanced at her. "You good?" Eli gave a small nod. "We're not done here, but tonight we're just watching." Argos raised her glass. To sparkle, secrets, and suspicious strippers. Darren laughed. "Cheers to that." They didn't leave. Not right away. Not until the bottle ran dry and Argos had tried, unsuccessfully, to climb a mirrored column. Velvet watched from the wings, gaze following them. And when the door finally closed behind them, the glow from Darren's charm slowly faded out like the end of a song no one remembered requesting. Chapter 12. Let Them Suffer. The mess hall was already buzzing when the crew staggered in, the overhead lights far too bright for anyone who'd made the mistake of staying out until sunrise. Bianca was halfway down the line, sliding a tray of eggs to a pair of soldiers, when she spotted them. One look at the slow shuffle, the squinting eyes, and Argos's oversized sunglasses indoors, and she stopped mid-motion. "Oh, you four," she said, voice dripping with the kind of knowing amusement only someone who'd seen every flavour of hangover could muster. "Let me guess, water's too loud today?" Darren attempted a dignified smile and failed. "We're fine. Totally fine." Caleb smirked behind him. "He's lying." Eli didn't even look up from her phone. "Coffee, now." Argos groaned dramatically, clutching her forehead. "And bread. Just bread. No smells." Bianca laughed under her breath. "Sit. I'll bring you the breakfast of shame." They collapsed into a corner table, each moving like they'd aged 40 years overnight. A few minutes later, Bianca arrived with plates loaded with greasy hash, buttered toast, fried potatoes, and bacon so crisp it crackled in the air. She dropped 4 mugs of jet black coffee in the middle of the table like ammunition. They were halfway through their first bites when Clara appeared, hands in her jacket pockets, expressions somewhere between amused and disappointed. DeSarah followed, leaning in the doorway, watching like she'd been waiting for this moment all morning. Clara stopped at their table. "Rough night?" Darren looked up through bloodshot eyes. "Define rough." DeSarah grinned. "Define night." Eli raised her mug in mock salute. "Nothing to see here." Argos mumbled into her toast. "I regret nothing." Clara gave them one last look, the kind that said she'd be filing this away for later, then started toward the serving line. DeSarah, however, reached over, plucked a piece of bacon from Darren's plate, and bit into it with a smirk. "Let them suffer," she told Clara as they walked away. "They've earned it." Clara stood at the serving line, dragging the edge of her fork slowly across an empty tray with surgical precision, the sound like nails on a chalkboard. She didn't break eye contact with Darren the entire time. Across the table, he winced. "That's cruel and unusual punishment." "Discipline," Clara corrected, walking over to join them. DeSarah trailed behind, a mug of coffee in hand. She took the seat across from Eli and, without saying a word, slurped the contents in one long, obnoxious draw. The sound seemed to rattle straight through Argos's skull. Argos groaned and slapped her hands over her ears. "Why are you like this?" DeSarah shrugged, slurping again. "Because I can." Eli muttered, "This is harassment," and went back to nursing her own coffee. Bianca just smirked from across the hall, clearly enjoying the show. Clara set her fork down with deliberate care and pulled out a chair, sliding into the empty spot beside Caleb. She leaned back, arms crossed. "So," she said, scanning the table one face at a time, "did you have fun last night?" Darren cleared his throat, reaching for his coffee. "Define fun." DeSarah grinned over her mug. "Define night." Eli didn't even look up. "Define your business." Clara raised an eyebrow at that, but her mouth curved just slightly. She knew that tone meant they weren't going to talk, which meant they really had fun. Argos perked up, sunglasses sliding down her nose. "Oh, I had a great time. There were sparkles, lights, music, chandeliers." Caleb gave her a look. "You didn't get the chandelier." "Not yet," she said, matter of fact. Darren smirked, leaning back like a man who'd survived the war. "Let's just say the spirits of diesel and recklessness would be proud." Clara's gaze lingered on him for a beat longer than necessary. "Uh-huh. Well, try not to embarrass yourselves again tonight. Or at least, get better at hiding it." DeSarah raised her cup in salute. "They won't." Before anyone could fire back at DeSarah, Bianca reappeared, sliding a fresh pot of coffee onto the table like she was delivering evidence. "I don't need to ask where you were," she said, topping off Caleb's mug. "I already know." Darren raised an eyebrow. "And how exactly would you already know?" Bianca smirked, not even pausing as she moved to refill Eli's cup. 400 informants. Eli nearly choked on her coffee. 400? Oh, easily, Bianca replied. Soldiers, traders, mercs, civilians, and they all love telling me things. Argos froze mid-bite, staring like Bianca had just confessed to mind-reading. Even the chandelier thing? Bianca didn't blink. Especially the chandelier thing. Caleb leaned back in his chair, watching the colour drain from Darren's face. Guess the circle of trust just got bigger. Darren sighed, stabbing at his bacon. Great, now the kitchen staff has my file. Bianca patted his shoulder on her way past. Honey, I had your file before you walked in the door. Darren groaned, burying his face in his hands. I need new friends. Argos grinned. I volunteer. You're one of the problems, Eli muttered. Clara pushed back from the table, standing with that calm, controlled authority that usually meant bad news. Instead, she just shook her head. I'm going to let you all suffer in peace. Desera stood too, draining the last of her coffee in one exaggerated slurp. Don't die before lunch. As they walked off, Bianca called over her shoulder from the serving line, Oh, and heartbreaker, next time you're at the lounge, tell Mara her sister says hi. Darren's head snapped up. Wait, how the hell do you... Bianca just smiled like the cat who'd eaten the canary. 400 informants, remember? Caleb chuckled. Argos laughed loud enough to turn heads, and Eli just muttered into her coffee. We're never living this down. Chapter 13. Robes of the Wolf. Morning light streamed through the carved crystal windows of Gunner's guest chamber, scattering soft patterns across the floor. The scent of fresh bread and spiced tea still lingered in the air from the breakfast tray, now pushed aside on a low table. Gunner sat in a tall-backed chair, one leg stretched out, rolling his shoulder to work a stubborn ache from the cybernetic connection. Eliana stood nearby, hair catching the light like strands of molten gold, her expression equal parts calm and watchful. You're still thinking about yesterday, she said, not looking at him. Thinking about a lot of things, he replied, a hint of a smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. But yesterday's in there, sure. Before she could answer, there was a soft knock at the door. Enter, Eliana called. The door opened to reveal a tall elf with silver-threaded hair and a measuring kit slung over one arm. His robe was an immaculate shade of moonlight grey, lined with delicate embroidery that marked him as a master tailor of Alfheim. He bowed slightly. Gunner, son of Earth, the ceremonial fitting, as arranged by Councillor Malorian. Gunner gave Eliana a sideways glance. Guess the old man wasn't kidding. The tailor's gaze swept over him with the practiced eye of someone already imagining the final garment. If you'll stand, we'll begin. Before you get too far, Gunner said, rising to his full height, Malorian already told me, no weapons, no armour. I've got a blade built into this arm, not removable. The elf's eyes flicked to the runed seam along his cybernetic forearm. Councillor Malorian has granted an exception, provided you swear not to display it. Gunner inclined his head once. Fair enough. Aliena stepped back to watch as the tailor began his work, the tape sliding over his shoulders, across his chest, down the length of his arms. For a moment it was silent save for the scratch of quill on parchment as the tailor noted the measurements. Not exactly my usual, Gunner muttered. Then consider it a rare honour, Eliana said softly. The tailor circled him with the quiet confidence of someone who'd dressed kings and generals, pausing every so often to make small, thoughtful notes. We begin, he said, with the base robe, woven from moon-thread silk, light as air, but stronger than steel when reinforced with the proper runes. This will serve as the foundation for all ceremonial garb worn before the council. He produced a swatch of shimmering fabric, letting it drape over Gunner's arm. It caught the light in a way that shifted from silver to deep storm grey with every movement. "Feels like nothing," Gunnar admitted. "That is the point," the tailor said. "Ceremony should be carried, not worn as a burden." Next came a series of trim samples, fine braids and embroidered patterns, each in a different hue. The tailor laid them out across the table in a fan of colour: deep midnight blue, forest green threaded with gold, silver runes on black, and a rare crimson edged with silver. "The trim," he explained, "is not merely decorative. It speaks of your role, your alliances, and the path you walk. Midnight blue for wisdom and strategy, forest and gold for the unity of realms, silver on black for resolve in shadow, crimson for the will to fight." Gunnar's gaze lingered on the silver on black, then shifted to the crimson. "What about mixing them?" Eliana stepped closer, fingers brushing the crimson edge. "A warrior's will bound by resolve. That combination would speak volumes before you said a word." The tailor inclined his head. "It would be bold, but I can weave both." He moved on to the mantle, a broad collar-like piece that draped over the shoulders. "For one of earth, I would recommend a storm feather weave, symbolic of strength enduring the tempests of fate. It will rest here," he gestured, "framing your presence." Eliana's lips curved faintly. "It would suit you." Finally, the sash. Every guardian, every council emissary, every honoured guest receives a sash, but yours may be unique. I propose a binding weave, storm grey fading to silver, signifying the bridge between realms. Gunnar looked between them both. "I'm starting to feel like you're dressing me for a war I don't get to fight." The tailor smiled faintly. "Every council appearance is a battlefield. The weapons are simply different." The tailor smiled faintly. "Every council appearance is a battlefield. The weapons are simply different." Gunnar's mouth curved in a humourless half-smile. "I believe it. Battle with steel and blood is simple. You see your enemy, you meet them head-on. Politics," he shook his head, "that's a fight where half the blades are hidden, and you don't know you've been cut until you're bleeding." Eliana gave a small nod, her expression unreadable but her eyes watching him closely. The tailor only inclined his head, as though Gunnar had just proven his point. "Then you will understand why the robe must speak for you before you take the floor." The tailor only inclined his head, as though Gunnar had just proven his point. "Then you will understand why the robe must speak for you before you take the floor." He gathered the fabric swatches and his notes in a precise, practiced motion. "The council will convene at high noon. Your fitting is complete, and I will have the robe delivered to your chamber before the 10th bell." "That soon?" Gunnar asked. The tailor's lips curved faintly. "For the wolf of earth? The loom will not rest until it is done." With a graceful bow he turned and departed, the door closing softly behind him. Eliana lingered near the window, eyes still on the shifting patterns of light across the floor. "You'll make quite an impression today." Gunnar glanced her way, his expression somewhere between wry amusement and quiet resolve. "Let's hope it's the right one." The door had barely closed behind the tailor when another knock came, firmer, more deliberate. "Enter," Eliana called. Mylorion stepped inside, his expression calm but his presence carrying that quiet weight that always seemed to fill the room. His gaze swept from Eliana to Gunnar, lingering for just a beat before he spoke. "Noon approaches faster than you think," he said. "I trust the fitting went without issue." Gunnar gave a dry smirk. "As painless as letting someone measure you for a robe can be." Maelorion's brow twitched in faint amusement. "Good. Then you're ready for the rest." He stepped closer, lowering his voice just enough to make the words for them alone. "When you walk into that chamber, you are not just the wolf of earth. You are a guest standing in the heart of Alfheim's authority. Every glance, every pause, every word will be weighed." "Yeah, I get it," Gunnar said. "I'm on their turf." doesn't mean I'm going to roll over. I would expect nothing less, Melorian replied evenly. But understand this, there are members of the council who will see you as a disruption before you speak. Your best weapon today will be control. Gunnar nodded once. No problem. I just want to make sure they hear me before they start leaning on her. He tipped his head toward Eliana. Melorian studied him for a long moment. They will. I will see to it. The older elf straightened. Your robes will arrive before the 10th bell. Be ready when they do. No weapons, no armor. The exception for your built-in blade stands, but keep it unseen. Understood, Gunnar said. Melorian's eyes softened just slightly. Then I will see you in the chamber. With that, he turned and left, the door closing quietly behind him. Eliana crossed her arms, watching the door. You're going to enjoy this far too much, aren't you? Gunnar's grin was slow, deliberate. Politics? Number but, walking into a room where they don't know what to make of me? That part, I'll savor. Chapter 14. Whispers in the High Chamber. The heavy doors shut behind Melorion, with a sound that sealed the world outside. Only 3 figures occupied the chamber, Melorion, Valith, and Thandor, the senior triumvirate of the Guardian Council. No scribes, no aides. The table between them was bare save for a single decanter of water. Velith's sharp eyes tracked Melorion as he approached. You requested urgency. I did. Melorion took his seat, his voice carrying the weight of what he had just witnessed. The prophecy is no longer a distant threat. It has begun. Thandor folded his hands, gaze narrowing. You're certain? Melorion nodded once. I have seen them together, the wolf and the guardian. The bond is already shaping their decisions, whether they recognize it or not. Distance between realms no longer blunts its pull. It grows stronger, and those around them are beginning to feel it. Valith leaned back, expression hardening. The full council has been told of the prophecy's existence. They understand the stakes, but knowing it has started will drive some to rash action. That is why I'm telling you first, Melorion said evenly, before this becomes another public debate. If it is to unfold, it must be witnessed and measured by those who understand the consequences. Thandor's gaze turned toward the tall windows where morning light glinted across etched runes in the glass. And so you bring the Wolf of Earth here, into Alfheim, at the very moment the prophecy turns. Melorion met his eyes without hesitation. Better here than beyond our sight. If we try to cage it, it will break free without warning. Here, at least, we can stand in the river as it rises. Valith's lips thinned. Then at noon we see for ourselves what current we're dealing with, and whether the wolf is prepared to swim or be swept away. The 3 shared a final look, part pact, part warning. Outside the chamber, Alfheim's bells marked the 9th hour. Thandor broke the silence first, his voice low but edged. If the 3 of us cannot agree on how to respond, what hope will the full council have of reaching consensus? Valith's fingers tapped lightly against the table. Then we must decide now. Reduce her status. Strip her of the autonomy she has taken. If the Guardian has bound herself to this bond, she cannot be left to act without oversight. That would shatter what trust remains, Thandor countered. And worse, it would force her to choose between us and him. If we drive her to defiance, we may lose her entirely. Melorion let the 2 speak, eyes moving from one to the other before he finally interjected. We are arguing from assumption, not from the truth of what lies in their hearts. We do not yet know the full measure of this bond, nor its strength. To act now harshly or favourably would be to anchor ourselves to an untested current. Valith frowned. Then what would you propose? Let the council convene, Melorion said. Let us see the Wolf of Earth stand before us and the Guardian at his side. The nature of their bond will reveal itself in that chamber, and from that, we can decide our course. Thandor leaned back, considering. So you suggest observation before action? Yes, Maelorian replied, but I also suggest we be ready for both outcomes. If the bond proves dangerous, we curtail her reach. If it proves beneficial, we may consider naming her as our official ambassador to Earth. Vaelith's gaze was sharp. That would place her between realms in an unprecedented role. Exactly, Maelorion said quietly, which is why we must be certain. The three elders exchanged a final glance. Agreement not in action, but in timing. At noon, the decision would begin to take shape. Chapter 15. Robes, Rules and Regrets. About Pockets. A soft chime sounded at the door. Aeliana rose, and an attendant slid in a long, lacquered case swaddled in mooncloth. No words, just a bow, and the door whispered shut again. Gunnar eyed the case like it might bite. That the uniform? Ceremonial robe, Aeliana corrected, but her mouth was already doing that thing it did when she was fighting a smile. Open it. He flipped the clasps. Inside, the pieces gleamed. The storm thread base robe, silvery grey that darkened when it moved, edge trimmed in crimson and silver on black, the storm feather mantle that would sit across his shoulders, and the bridge sash fading from thundercloud, grey to bright silver. Gunnar let out a low whistle. Looks expensive. It is, she said. Try not to fight anyone in it. He lifted the robe and looked over the collar, the inside seams, the runic stitching. Then, dead serious. So what do I wear under it? Aeliana blinked. Clothes. Specify guardian, he gestured at the window light. I'm new to elf formal wear, and I'd prefer not to get arrested for draft violations. Her composure cracked. A quiet laugh slipped out. Traditionally, a fitted undertunic, trousers and soft boots. No armour, no harness, definitely not shirtless. Tragedy, he said. And pockets? None. He stared at her. That's not clothing. That's betrayal. You'll survive an hour without 14 compartments. She tapped the robe's inner placket. There is a hidden loop for your talisman. It should rest against your skin, beneath the mantle. He thumbed the chain at his neck. If it peeks out, the elders will faint, she deadpanned, which would be a memorable entrance, but perhaps not the one we want. He held the robe up to his frame. And boots? Soft-soled, so your steps don't echo. She tilted her head. Also, so you don't stomp at the council like a thunderstorm. I don't stomp. You absolutely stomp. Gunnar set the robe across the chair and nodded at the mantle. Which end is up on that bird thing? It's not a bird thing. She stepped in, fingers deft. Storm feather weave. Here, this clasp is the star hook. It sits over your left collarbone. He tried the clasp. It slid. He muttered something unprintable. Aeliana's hands moved, sure, quick, settling fabric, squaring the fall of the mantle, smoothing an invisible crease. Stand still, she said, warmth creeping into her voice. You're worse than Argos in a tailor's stall. Low blow, he fought a smile. Argos at least has pockets. She looped the sash around his waist, drew it snug, and tied a knot that looked simple but felt like spellwork. The crimson trim caught the light. The silver on black lay quiet and lethal beneath it. When she stepped back, she didn't speak for a breath. Well, he asked, do I look like I'm about to preach or duel? Her eyes softened, like the wolf of earth. Who knows which one to choose? He cleared his throat, suddenly aware of the way the collar sat against his neck. For the record, I'm still not sold on the no pockets policy. For the record, she said, moving closer to tuck his talisman neatly into the hidden loop, you don't need pockets. You have me. A beat. The room held its breath. Then she patted the sash once, businesslike again. Boots next, and remember, no armour, no weapons. He flexed his cybernetic fingers. Blades staying sheathed. Promise. Good. She angled her head toward the washstand. Now put the undertunic on before the entire citadel learns more about the Wolf of Earth than it asked for. He grinned finally. You're very funny. I'm very serious, she said, but the corner of her mouth betrayed her. Hurry. We beat the 10th bell by looking prepared, not by sprinting half-dressed through sacred corridors. Fine, fine. He scooped up the underlayers. But if anyone asks why I keep tugging at this thing, I'm telling them it's because elves outlawed pockets. Tell them it's because politics is more uncomfortable than armor, she said, turning to give him privacy. They'll agree. Fair, he admitted from behind the screen. But armor has buckles. Buckles make sense. Star hooks make sense, she called back. He emerged a minute later, undertunic on, trousers straight, soft boots in hand. We're going to disagree on star hooks. You can disagree with them, she said, reaching to settle the mantle again, after you survive them. His smile thinned into something steadier. Working on it. Good, she murmured, and handed him the boots. On, Wolf. The 10th bell is coming. The chime of the 10th bell rolled through the corridors of the Alfheimian guest wing, a deep, resonant tone that seemed to settle in the bones. Gunnar glanced toward the door just as the knock came, 3 firm raps, crisp and precise. Aeliana was already rising from her chair, her robe flowing in the morning light. Gunnar stood with her, adjusting the drape of his ceremonial robe with the faintest grimace. When the door opened, 2 elven guards stood framed in the archway, armor polished to mirror sheen, spears upright in perfect symmetry. Their expressions were carved from stone. Guardian Vale, Wolf of Earth. The lead guard's voice was formal but carried the weight of long tradition. The council requests your presence. We are to escort you to the holding chambers until the questioning begins. Gunnar's blue eye flicked to Aeliana. She gave the smallest nod, calm, measured, but he saw the tension in her shoulders. Guess that's our cue, he murmured, stepping forward. The hem of the robe whispered against the floor, the embedded blade in his cybernetic arm hidden beneath the wide sleeve as promised. The hallways were quiet save for the echo of boots and the soft clink of the guard's armor. Sunlight spilled through tall windows in pale gold bars, catching motes of dust that drifted like suspended time. The holding chamber lay ahead, an ornate antechamber where they would wait apart from the rest of the council until summoned. As they neared the carved double doors, Gunnar leaned slightly toward Aeliana. Politics, he muttered under his breath, always was the harder battlefield. Her lips curved just barely. Then let's make sure we win this one too. The guards stopped. One reached for the door handle. Guardian Vale, Wolf of Earth, you may enter. Chapter 16. The Hall of Voices. The council chamber was already alive with murmurs when Maelorian stepped through the high arched doors. Shafts of silver daylight spilled through the lattice windows, catching the edges of the carved stone benches that ringed the circular hall. The great crescent table at the far end was occupied, each seat filled by an elder whose expression ranged from cool detachment to open skepticism. A soft chime echoed through the chamber as the Keeper of Order struck his staff to the floor. All rise, the High Council of Alfheim convenes. Robes shifted, chairs scraped, the air thickened with formality. Maelorion took his place at the central dais, hands resting lightly on the table. Before we begin questioning Guardian Aeliana, he said, voice carrying easily in the quiet, there is a matter I must bring to your attention. The Wolf of Earth has requested to speak to this council prior to her summons. It was like tossing a spark into dry tinder. One elder leaned forward, lips pressed thin. We have no precedent for granting an outsider audience before a formal inquiry. Another scoffed openly. A human warrior with no standing here. Shall we start inviting the smiths and merchants to address us before trials as well? A ripple of discontent moved around the benches. Maelorion let them voice it. Once. I have approved his request, he said simply. The noise sharpened. You presume much authority. This is irregular. What could he possibly have to say that... The keeper's staff struck again, but the voices only lowered to sharp whispers. From the opposite arc of the crescent, Councillor Thandor raised his hand, his deep, steady voice cut across the noise. We are not here to be ruled by precedent alone. If the wolf seeks to speak before the inquiry, there may be wisdom in hearing him. Better to know the shape of his mind than be surprised by it later. Councillor Vailith inclined her head in agreement, and denying the request would signal distrust before a word is even spoken. That is not the tone we should set, unless we mean to make an enemy of him. Several elders shifted uncomfortably at that. Melorian let the silence linger just long enough before leaning forward. There is another matter, one not for the ears of the accused, nor for the wolf himself. His gaze swept the room, pinning each member in turn. The prophecy we have long guarded. It has begun. I have seen enough with my own eyes to confirm it. The signs are no longer theory. They are here. The tension in the room changed, no less sharp, but deeper now, with unease curling under the formality. One of the junior members leaned forward. Then surely that is all the more reason to press them for answers. No. Mylorian's tone left no opening. We will not speak of it to them. Not yet. They must not be influenced or pushed. Their choices must be their own. Vailith added quietly, Fate is not kind to those who try to steer it by force. And the three of us know, Thandor said, his voice carrying finality, that the wrong pressure, applied at the wrong time, could doom what little chance the realms have left. For once the chamber was still. Melorian straightened, letting the moment breathe. We will hear the wolf first. Then, and only then, will we proceed to Guardian Eliana. Until that time, keep your counsel. And your tongues. The keeper struck his staff. So ordered. The chamber settled, but the undercurrent remained, a mix of curiosity, reluctance, and the quiet realization that whatever was about to walk through those doors might shape the fate of realms. Chapter 17. The Wolf in the Hall of Voices. The knock at the door was measured, crisp, the sound of discipline. Eliana looked up from where she sat near the window. Gunnar, already standing, straightened the ceremonial robe across his shoulders. It still felt strange on him, lighter than the armour that had been his second skin for decades. No plates, no pauldrons, just finely woven cloth and the weight of the moment ahead. The door opened to reveal an elven guard, his posture a perfect line from boots to helm. They are ready for you, Wolf of Earth? Gunnar gave a small nod. Then let's not keep them waiting. The walk to the chamber was silent save for the muted echo of boots on polished stone. The robe moved differently than he was used to, quiet where his armour would have announced him with the faint clink of steel. Eliana walked at his side, her presence steady, the two guards ahead and two behind, making the corridor feel narrower than it was. As the great double doors loomed ahead, they swung open without a word. Inside, the council chamber glowed with soft daylight, filtering through high, arched windows. Tiered rows of seats curved in a semicircle, the central dais waiting like the eye of a storm. Gunnar stepped forward alone. There was a brief murmur from some of the councillors. They were used to seeing him in black tactical armour, cybernetic arm exposed, the very image of the Pax Alpha. Today, in the deep blue ceremonial robe edged with silver, he was something else entirely. Melorian's gaze found him and gave the faintest nod, the signal to begin. Gunnar inclined his head toward the assembled councillors. Honoured council, thank you for hearing me before you proceed with your questioning of Guardian Eliana Vale. I am aware this is not how you are accustomed to seeing me. That is intentional. He let that hang for a moment, scanning the chamber. I have always come before you as a soldier, armoured, armed, and ready for battle. But I am here today not as the alpha of the pack, nor as the man who fought in your wars. I am here as an ally, as someone who believes in what we've built together, and as the man who has worked beside Aeliana to make it real." His voice stayed even, respectful. 5 realms: Earth, Alfheim, Mirkdust, Atherin, and soon Concordia, are united in no small part because of her. Together, we faced Draven and shattered his forces. Together, we forged the alliance that allowed this council to stand here today without the shadow of Ultranacius over us. He shifted his weight slightly, the silver trim of the robe catching the light. "You know what that war cost me. You know I went where others would not. That is not a wound I carry in bitterness, but in truth. The truth that some battles cannot be delayed without great loss, and the truth that Aeliana has been at my side in every step since." He paused, letting the silence settle. "I ask you, no, I urge you, to judge her by what she has achieved, not by the fears of politics. Weakening her weakens everything we've built, and I will not see that happen without speaking plainly." A low ripple of reaction ran through the benches. Councillor Valith was the first to rise. "We hear you, Wolf, but understand, your presence here does not alter that today's matter is the conduct of a guardian. Your respect for her is noted, but our laws stand apart from alliances." Another councillor leaned forward, voice taut. "Nor do we take kindly to realms beyond Alfheim presuming to influence guardian discipline." Gunnar met their eyes, one at a time. When he spoke, his voice was even, carrying without effort. "I'm not here to rewrite your laws. I'm here because I know what she's done, and what it's cost her. If you measure her only by the lines she's crossed, you're ignoring the ground she's won for you." The chamber quieted. "She's forged ties with Earth that brought your first embassy beyond this realm. She's stood with me in Mirkdust, brought Atherin to the table, opened the path to Concordia. That's 5 realms aligned, not through decree, but through trust, through her work. Without her, Draven would still be carving up your borders and scattering your people. Without her, Ultranacius would still draw breath." Several councillors shifted, the weight of his words settling in. Councillor Thandor spoke next, his tone slower, measured. "None here deny the results. The question is whether they justify the means." "That's for you to decide," Gunnar replied. "But I'll remind you, I've been in this chamber before, always in armour, always as a soldier. Today I came as a guest, because I respect what this council represents. I'm asking you to look at the whole of her service, not just the rules she's bent to serve it." A murmur rippled through the chamber, but Maelorian raised a hand, stilling it. "You have been heard, Wolf of Earth." Gunnar inclined his head. "You may remain as the Guardian is brought in," Maelorian continued, "or take your leave until she has spoken." "I'll remain," Gunnar said simply. Maelorian nodded once. "So be it." Gunnar stepped back to the side, the robe's folds whispering against the marble floor. His expression was unreadable, but the way he carried himself, shoulders squared, chin lifted, left no doubt he'd said what he came to say. Several councillors followed him with their eyes, their expressions a careful mask of neutrality. A few looked faintly unsettled, others pensive. One leaned toward his neighbour, whispering under his breath, only to straighten abruptly when Maelorian's gaze swept the room. From the far end, the herald's voice rang out, "Guardian Aeliana Vale, of the Gatewatch." The doors opened once more. Aeliana stepped through with measured grace, her guardian's mantle drawn close, the silver embroidery catching the chamber's light. Her gaze swept the room, not defiant, but steady. Unflinching, she caught sight of Gunnar immediately. For the briefest moment, something unspoken passed between them, a flicker of connection amid the formal stillness, before she turned her attention fully to the council dais. The hush in the chamber deepened. The trial of words was about to begin. Chapter 18. The Oath on Trial. The chamber was silent enough to hear the faint creak of the ancient doors as they shut behind her. Aeliana walked forward, each step measured, her mantle trailing just above the marble. At the centre dais, Maelorion rose to his feet, his voice deep and carrying. Guardian Aeliana Vale, step forward. She obeyed without hesitation, coming to stand before the elevated semicircle of council seats. From the shadows at the side, Gunnar remained still, his single eye fixed on her. Maelorion gestured, and a slender pedestal was carried forth by 2 attendants. Upon it rested a silver disc, its surface etched with runes that glimmered faintly in the chamber's light. It was old, older than Alfheim's current seat of governance, a relic used only in formal swearing-ins and trials. "Place your hand upon the sigil of accord," Maelorion said. She did so, fingers brushing cool metal. The runes warmed faintly under her touch, recognizing her as one who had once sworn the Guardian Oath. "Repeat after me," Maelorion intoned, his voice echoing off the stone. "I stand before the council in truth and in duty." "I stand before the council in truth and in duty," she echoed, her voice steady. "My words shall honour the balance and my station. My words shall honour the balance and my station. May the realms judge me if I speak false. May the realms judge me if I speak false." The runes flared, then dimmed, sealing the oath. An elder to Maelorion's right rose, his tone formal and unyielding. "Guardian Aeliana Vale, you are called before this council to answer for accusations that you have acted beyond the limits of your charge. It is claimed that, without council sanction, you involved yourself in the affairs of realms outside your assigned watch, engaged in diplomacy without authority, and committed forces in violation of the Guardian Oath." The words hung in the air like a drawn blade. Another councillor leaned forward, voice like ice. "How do you answer to these charges?" Her gaze was steady, almost too steady. She could feel Gunnar's presence somewhere behind her, not near enough to touch, but close enough to burn at the edges of her awareness. She drew a breath, and then she dropped the stone in the still pond. "Guilty." The word crashed through the chamber. The reaction was immediate. Half the councillors surged forward in their seats, voices overlapping in outrage or vindication. A few already began dictating next steps, shouting for censure, demotion, banishment. Others barked for order, their voices swallowed in the rising din. The senior councillors tried to calm it, but the chamber had dissolved into chaos. Aeliana didn't raise her voice often, but when she did, it cut through everything. "So is this council?" It was as if she'd struck the room. The noise didn't vanish, but it collapsed into a charged, unsteady hush. The ripple of her words carried up to the farthest balcony. Eyes sharpened, posture straightened. No one moved. She let the silence sit for a heartbeat longer, then she began. "You call me guilty because I broke my oath to act only as this council commands. I accept that. I broke it with open eyes and a steady hand." Her gaze swept the room. "But tell me, where was this council when Ultranacius rose? When his armies swept across the realms and his shadow poisoned the skies? You did nothing. A mere mortal from Earth. One you barely trusted. Had to take up the fight. You would not. It cost him his arm, his eye, and more blood than any of you here have ever spilled." She didn't look toward Gunnar. She didn't have to. "Where was this council when Ravina's poison spread through the veins of our worlds? How many died under her control before you stirred yourselves to speak, much less act?" Her voice sharpened, gaining an edge that made even the most jaded flinch. "Where was this council when Draven's shadow spread unchecked? Your inaction allowed him to gather his armies, to unleash war across Murkdust. Do you remember the battle you never fought? Because I do. I remember the names of every warrior who fell there, while you sat here in safety debating how much involvement would be acceptable." She turned then, her eyes locking on Maelorion, not accusing, but reminding. You know the truth of what I say, for you were there. You led warriors into battle against the Void Wizard, and even then, even with your strength, even with mine, we barely prevailed. That power still lingers out there, hidden, waiting. The chamber was utterly still now. Even the youngest councillors had no clever retorts on their lips. You would brand me guilty? Then do it. But know this, you are just as guilty of inaction, of cowardice, of letting the realms bleed while you guarded your seats. For a moment, no one spoke. The weight of her words hung in the air like the smoke after battle, heavy, acrid, impossible to breathe without feeling it burn. One of the senior councillors leaned forward. Let her speak, as if they'd needed permission. Eliana took a slow step forward, every inch the soldier who had stood against armies, not a prisoner before a tribunal. You think I broke my oath because I chose to act where you would not, that I tarnished the Guardians because I dared to protect those who could not protect themselves. Her voice softened, not weaker, but more dangerous. But I say it is you who have tarnished it, by turning the Guardian oath into an excuse for inaction. A councillor in the second row shifted uncomfortably. Another opened their mouth to object, but the glance of one of the 3 senior members stilled them. When the people remember the Guardians, they will not remember the debates, the votes, the hours you sat here weighing if action was worth the cost. She paused, letting the silence stretch tight. They will remember the ones who stood beside them, who bled beside them. Her hands curled into fists at her sides, the polished floor catching the faint tremor in her arms. I bled beside them. I bled beside him. She didn't turn, but Gunner's presence behind her felt like a steady anchor, unshaken. When you call me guilty, understand that you are also condemning every warrior who acted when you would not. Every life saved that you did not value enough to risk your own comfort. She let her gaze sweep them all, landing for a heartbeat on each of the 3 senior councillors. I am guilty of breaking your rules, but I will never be guilty of standing by while the realms burn. The chamber was so silent now that she could hear her own breath. And then she straightened, shoulders back, chin high. So, pronounce your sentence. Strip me of my rank. Send me to exile. But I will not apologize for saving lives, even if it means spitting in the face of your complacency. No one moved. One councillor cleared their throat, but whatever words they'd been forming withered under the stare of the senior 3. Finally, Mylorian's voice broke the stillness, calm but edged with iron. Enough! The command rippled through the chamber, pulling the weight back into the council's hands. He rose, slowly scanning each face in turn. You have heard her answer. You have heard the truth in it. Let us deliberate before this becomes nothing more than a shouting match. The formal words were enough to signal the end, but not enough to break the spell of her speech. As she stepped back, the council still watched her with the raw attention of those who'd been struck and were still deciding if it was a wound or a wake-up. She didn't bow. She didn't break eye contact. She turned on her heel and walked to her place beside Gunner. She faced the chamber again, her voice steady but charged. This is the Wolf of Earth, the Alpha of the Pack. Through his leadership and the sacrifices of his people, 5 realms now stand in alliance where once there was only mistrust. When? She let the question hang, her gaze sweeping the room. Was the last time that happened? Silence answered her. Not even the senior councillors spoke. Her eyes found Mylorian. You know the truth of it. You've seen what we've done together. Without him, none of it would have happened. Then she turned fully toward Gunner, and something in the air shifted, softer but no less unshakable. He has asked me to marry him, to join him, and become one with him. Yes, he is mortal. She stepped forward, closing the space between them. I don't care. I love this man, this human, this wolf of earth. She took his hands in hers, not caring that every eye in the chamber was on them. Her voice dropped just enough for the intimacy to cut deeper. Yes, Gunnar. I, Alia Lynn Tavara, accept your proposal of marriage to you. David White. Gasps rippled through the chamber, some of shock, some of outrage, and from the three senior councillors. The quiet stillness of those who knew the weight of a true name spoken aloud. Chapter 19. The Storm in the Chamber. For a heartbeat, the chamber was frozen. Then the sound came, sharp, chaotic, impossible to separate into single voices. Dozens of councillors spoke at once, some rising from their seats, others slamming hands to the table, their outrage echoing off the marble walls. She dares bond with a mortal. This is an insult to... The pounding of the ceremonial staff tried to bring order, but it was like striking a match in a hurricane. Gunnar stood at her side, motionless, hands still in hers. His one blue eye scanned the chaos, not with defiance, not with smugness, but with the same calm focus he wore before a battle. On the dais, the three senior members remained seated. Malorian did not flinch, though his gaze swept the room like a measuring blade. Valith leaned forward, lips pressed thin. Thandor's eyes narrowed in thought, not judgment. Aliana's shoulders were square, her chin lifted. If the chamber wanted to consume itself in noise, she would let it. For now. Enough! The single word cracked through the room, Malorian's voice carrying like a war horn. You forget yourselves. This is the Council of Guardians, not a fish market. The lesser voices faltered, unwilling to push against his tone. Valith rose slowly. Whether we approve or not, the declaration has been made, and it is binding. The whispering started again, smaller, but no less heated. Thandor's voice was steady as stone. Then the question before us is not whether she may do this, but whether we have the wisdom to see what it means for the realms. From the lower benches, a voice called out raw and unfiltered. He is mortal. In the span of her life, he is but a blink. When his years end, will the Guardian's bond not shatter her focus? Another voice joined in, colder. What happens to the alliances he has forged when he is gone? Will they crumble without him? Or is this union meant to bind us to earth permanently? And another, more cutting still. If you love him, Guardian, will you abandon your post when his time runs out? The questions came like arrows from all sides, some honest, some meant to wound. Gunnar's gaze never wavered. I have faced the Demon King, the Black Dawn, and enemies in more realms than I care to name. Every alliance I have built has been with one goal, to protect all of you, not to tether you to me. That won't change if I draw my last breath tomorrow, or in 30 years. Eliana's voice followed, quiet but unshakable. The Council has always known life is fleeting for mortals. You do not measure a guardian by how long they live. You measure them by what they do with the time given. And this man has done more in half a century than some of you have done in 5 centuries. Silence rippled across the chamber. Not agreement, not yet, but attention. The quiet lasted only seconds before a councillor from the Western Wing leaned forward, his tone like sharpened glass. Opportunity? Or liability? You speak as though the Wolf of Earth's alliances are unbreakable. Yet alliances forged in the heat of war often fade in the cold of peace. Another, a silver-haired elf whose family name was older than some kingdoms, countered with equal bite. And what if this mortal's enemies become ours by extension? What if his wars drag Alfheim into conflicts we could otherwise avoid? Gunnar answered before Aliana could draw breath. You've been in those wars, councillor. Or were you content to watch them from your halls while we bled to keep your gates intact? The chamber bristled. some offended, others grudgingly approving. A younger voice rose from the middle tier. Even if we accept his record, how do we protect the Guardian when age claims him? Will she not be diminished? Eliana's jaw tightened, but her words were precise. Your question assumes the worth of a bond is measured by its length. That is a coward's view. I do not fear the end of his life any more than he fears the length of mine. What matters is what we build between now and then. Valith's voice cut through, measured but firm. The Guardian speaks truth. Bonds between realms, like bonds between people, are not eternal by nature. They require tending. This is no different. The silver-haired counsellor wasn't done. And if the bond collapses, if their personal union fractures, would the 5 realms he boasts of remain united? Thandor leaned forward, voice low but resonant. Let me remind you, those alliances were not born of romance. They were born of necessity, trust, and shared struggle. Remove one, and the rest do not vanish overnight, unless we allow them to. From the dais, Maelorion finally stood, his presence filling the room without raising his voice. I have known the Wolf of Earth since before some of you held your seats. I have seen his temper, his defiance, and his stubborn refusal to quit when every sane mind would have walked away. You may question his mortality. That is fair. But do not question his loyalty. Or hers. He let the weight of his gaze sweep the chamber. And do not forget, 5 realms sit at the table today because these 2 made it so. Dismiss that, and you dismiss your own safety. The murmurs shifted, less hostile now, more thoughtful. Still, doubt clung to the edges of the room like morning mist. Maelorion let the chamber breathe for a long, deliberate moment before speaking again. The matter is not decided, he said, each word carrying the weight of finality. Nor will it be decided here, today. We will reconvene once the dust of this session settles, and after you have all considered the consequences of inaction. He turned his gaze toward Eliana and Gunnar, the faintest flicker of something unspoken in his eyes. You are dismissed. No gavel, no formal vote, just the authority of one of the 3 who could end a debate with a single breath. Gunnar inclined his head, not a bow but a warrior's acknowledgement, and stepped back. Eliana matched him, her expression calm, but the set of her shoulders was pure defiance. The great doors of the council chamber swung open, revealing 2 ranks of elven guards standing at attention. As the pair crossed the threshold, every guard lowered their head in unison. Not to the council, but to them. It was not the first time. Every time the Wolf of Earth and the Guardian stood before the council, they left with more of the guards' respect. Whispers would already be making their rounds in the barracks, stories of the 2 who could stand toe-to-toe with the most powerful voices in Alfheim, and not only survive, but leave the chamber's foundation shaken. By the time they reached the outer steps, Gunnar caught the faintest trace of a smirk on one of the younger guards' faces. The look of someone who had just witnessed another chapter in a legend they'd been following for years. Eliana didn't speak until they were well clear of the chamber doors. You know, she murmured, one day they're going to start betting on us. Gunnar's eye glinted. Then we'd better make sure we keep their coin moving. They moved down the sunlit steps, the murmur of the council fading behind them. Gunnar glanced sideways at her, the corner of his mouth twitching. Shall we get Darren a robe? Eliana blinked, caught between amusement and disbelief. A robe? He nodded, entirely serious. After all, he's going to be my best man. Seems only right he suffer through the same ceremonial torture. Her lips curved, though she tried to hide it. I'd pay to see him in one. He'd either strut like a peacock or use it to start a bar fight before the day's out. Gunnar's smile deepened. That's what I'm counting on, but there's no way he's seeing me in this thing until the wedding day. They fell into step toward her cottage, the robe swaying around his boots. For once, he didn't seem to mind the unfamiliar weight, though his hand lingered at the edge as if testing its measure. The path wound between silver-barked trees and wildflower-strewn meadows, the afternoon light softening to gold. By the time the stone and timber outline of her cottage came into view, the last of the council's voices had faded completely, replaced by the steady rhythm of their footsteps. And when they reached the door, neither hurried to open it. Fade to black. Epilogue. Teeth in the dark. The chamber smelled of cold iron and old blood. Shadows clung to the stone like they were afraid to let go, pooling in the corners where the torches didn't dare burn. Syrian lay propped on a slab of blackstone, her body swaddled in shadow steel restraints. Runes pulsed faintly along the bands at her wrists and ankles. Not to hold her down, but to keep her together. Every so often, a flicker of unstable magic rippled through her veins, lighting them under her skin like cracks in molten glass. Sorvin lay chained on the floor beside her, still shifting between flesh and spectre. His breathing was slow, uncertain. She turned her head toward him, ignoring the ache in her neck. "They think you're broken," she whispered, lips curling in a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "But we're not broken, are we? No, we're just sharper now." Her eyes flicked toward the heavy door. Guards stood outside, cloaked and silent. Priests moved beyond them, their murmurs like the drone of flies. Somewhere deeper in the fortress, the traitor's voice carried, cold, amused, planning. She shut her eyes and saw his face, not the traitor's, Gunner's. The way he'd looked the last time she saw him, fury burning in his one good eye, Alpha at his side. She felt the impact again, the tearing, the severing. Dead. They had to be dead. Her breathing slowed, and her voice dropped to a hiss. "They can't stop us now." Her mind drifted further, to a small hidden place far from the Black Dawn's grasp. A face she'd only seen in fleeting dreams since the day she left him. Her son. My blood. My heir. The thought came like a pulse of heat in her chest, stronger than the sedatives, stronger than the restraints. She mouthed the words again and again, a rhythm, a vow. One of the priests passing by paused, tilting his head at her whispers, but she didn't look at him, didn't even open her eyes. She was somewhere else entirely, in the woods where she'd left him, in the city she'd hidden him from, in the moment she would take him back. Her lips curled, baring teeth. "I'm coming for you," she breathed, so soft only Sorvin could hear. "And I'll burn the world down to keep you." Somewhere, Sorvin's spectral tail flicked once. Outside the chamber, the traitor paused in his steps, as if sensing the temperature shift, and smiled to himself. In the dark, the last piece on the board was sharpening her claws.